We'll be flipping through IG.
Okay, we're live streaming. Almost.
I'll post this in. Ooh, I love that live thing now at the top of school. Did you see that?
Yeah. Yeah, a couple cool little updates there, huh?
Yeah.
Pretty sweet. Ooh, people are coming in now.
Hot.
Don't forget to change your chat settings from host and panelist to everyone. What's up, guys? What's going on? Hello.
Hello, everyone.
What is going on? No hat today, Jake. No hat. No hat today. I'm a shirt guy again. Keep switching back and forth. Yeah, let us know where you're from in the chat section. Cali, Ottawa,
Sweden.
Austin. Got Hawaii, Nashville, Atlanta, Iowa, Fort Worth, Nashville. Oh, too fast. New York. North Carolina.
I just keep seeing Sweden.
Denmark. Yeah, Sweden. India.
Everybody get their texts and emails and faxes from me. Okay. Did everything come through?
Carrier pigeon.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say carrier pigeon.
We're the only company that does fax marketing still. You can hear everyone's dial up in the background.
We're moving to Harry Potter owls as we are increasingly more and more UK. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Rob, we are here in Oxford at the moment, which is pretty Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Isn't there a university building that Hogwarts is based on?
Yeah, it's all around here. You can go inside like the hall where they have dinner and stuff.
Really? Sounds so British.
Someone says, ugh, muggles. Yeah, we're going to chit-chat here, guys. Just so you know, we're going to chit-chat here for a few minutes just to let people kind of come in the door a little bit.
Yeah, just for context, Rob and Warren are in the same room. That's why Rob has to stay muted, because otherwise we'd hear Warren twice. And as lovely as his voice is, it would be confusing.
There.
Oh, very nice.
We are in the same room. We're at Rob's because I'm currently, obviously, in Angleterre in England.
Rob's.
And so I drove up from West Sussex earlier today to lovely Oxford. Oh, look, I'm seeing different things.
Yep. I'll give you back screen sharing.
Jersey.
When it's your turn.
That's right. That's right, Joseph. Look at those lovely Odyssey headphones. Mine broke. Just kidding. I'm kidding. They're right here.
Why did I believe you for a second, Jake? I don't know why.
You could run over him with a bus.
I know, dude. Wow.
How heavy are they?
I'm just a Star Wars fan, and I really wanted to look like Princess Leia today. That's
Yeah,
really what's
they are the
going on.
Princess
So many
Leia headphone.
Leia jokes.
They're usually getting made at my own expense, so I thought I'd quickly get it out of the way. May the Force be with you. Yes.
Exactly.
Hello in Singapore. I'm seeing the messages now. Got muscles in the neck from wearing the headphones. I don't think they're that heavy. I've got heavier headphones that are half the size. So, yeah, I mean, they're definitely not the lightest headphones, but I've mixed albums. I did a Rick Springfield record a couple of weeks ago. Finished it up with the oh God, what's the name of the brothers? Really famous brothers, drummer and the bass player. I'm completely blanking. Greg and
Allman Brothers.
Almost. That's a Greg. No, the rhythm section. And anyway, it's an amazing album. And I ended up mixing so much of it on these headphones because I was moving between studios all the time. And I would forget after a while I was wearing them. They are really my favorite headphones. And it's no accident there's three of us here that use the same headphones.
Was it Abbott Brothers?
No, session players. Right, I don't know why I'm blanking because I actually know them and I'm seeing their faces.
It's okay, I do it all the time.
It happens. One of the great things about being in the business for a long time is you meet a lot of people, and the downside is you meet a lot of people, and you're like, "I know you really well.
Yeah, you can
What's your
know
name
them.
again?"
You can know them intimately, but not know their names.
Know their first name, but not remember their last name.
Anyone here?
Steady.
Give us a 1 in chat if you're coming from the Odyssey. We're doing this obviously in partnership with Odyssey. If you guys came from their email list, put a 1 in chat.
One,
Alright.
one.
There we go.
I for no. Yeah, great.
Oh, welcome.
How many people are in?
We're up to almost
540
5.
so far.
Yeah, 550 almost.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
We'll go for a few more minutes, guys, while we're just waiting for people to trickle in. Then we'll get started.
How about this? 2 in chat if you've been to Fix Mix before. There we go. There's the repeats.
Just a couple.
There are the fans.
Just a couple.
Great.
3 in chat if Caleb is your favorite.
Oh, there's some 1 and 2s.
Oh,
That was
wait.
good. Do some 1 and 2s.
Don't play this game.
4 in chat if Jake's your favorite.
73.
How rude. Yeah.
Okay.
1, 2,
This
3,
is pretty
4.
competitive.
2, 4, 1, 9, 7, 8. No,
I
make
see
me
a- I s-
choose.
I see a lot less 4s than
I-
3s.
6, 6, 6.
Yeah, right.
Maybe we see what we want to see.
And then just 10s for Warren.
10s in chat if Warren's your favorite. Come on.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
There we
Yeah,
go.
There
There we go.
No kidding.
Brrrr.
Yeah.
Ah, you're too kind. 10s. 10 times 10. If 6 was 9, 10. Ah, you're very kind. Rob. No, we got a Rob. We got a Rob up there.
I don't get a number.
Well, you don't get a microphone.
7s for Rob.
7s for Rob.
We wanted to spare you.
Yeah, I
bro.
saw at least
7,
one.
7,
Rob.
7, 7, 7. 7, 7, 7, 7.
7s for Rob.
This is a fun game. Someone says.
This is how the Fix and Mix goes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 7.
Well, it's been real. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, we just do this for 3 hours and then that's it.
It sounds
Very-
great. On
Very
the-
self-congratulatory. That's what we call them. Rob 7s.
Somebody
for
wrote
Rob
one.
Mazes.
Somebody wrote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10.
Thank you.
Legend. Matthew,
Alright.
that's funny.
Last of my communications are going out now, so we can start in just a sec. Couple people
Lots of marvelous comments. I like that. Yes, I am doing marvelously well. Is everybody doing marvelously well? Do we have a number for that? Yes, sure. Yes, yes. Yep, yes. Marvelous, marvelous. Sleepy. Marvelous. Yeah, marvelous.
Wake up.
Too warm. Where are you? Germany. Too early. Germany?
Too
So you're
too
just-
early.
It's an hour ahead. 10 past 5, yes? Central SET, Central European. It says warm in Germany. I'll be in Germany in Studio Zane. I don't know when is that, like 4 months? That should be fun.
I've spoke to a couple people in Germany recently, and everyone's complaining because they got a heat wave and they don't really have AC there too frequently.
Mm.
So they
Same
just
here
have
in
to
England, yeah.
Suffer through it.
Is it like a humid heat? Is there a lot of moisture over in the in UK?
I mean, somewhat, because an English summer's day is, if you're lucky, 75% sun and 25% rain. It can be like really, really blazing hot and then just rain for 20 minutes and then go back to blazing hot again. I mean, that's
Yeah,
the English way. And I think, Germany. I've been to Germany many, many, many times. It's a much bigger country. So I don't know if there's one necessarily weather pattern for the whole thing, but yeah, similar. Rains a lot, so yes, you're right. Humidity when it gets hot.
pretty much all over, right? Like it's just like the whole island is raining.
Yeah, which is not good for the cricket. That's a whole other discussion. I see a lot of Indians here, so we can talk cricket.
Yeah, let's not talk cricket.
It's fine.
We'll be here for 7
Confuse the
hours.
Americans. Confuse the Americans.
Well, that's
A
okay.
good way to keep audience retention up is to talk cricket.
Although, strange enough, lots of people talking cricket. Test match,
Yeah.
cricket. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw about 20 people drop off as soon as you said cricket.
All the Americans.
Football, says somebody.
Yeah.
There we go.
Good stuff.
All right. Well, we should get started. Thanks everyone for being here for this very special Fix the Mix challenge. If you're new here with us for the first time, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Really glad to have you. Obviously, this is a very special Fix the Mix. In terms of introductions, let's just dive into it. If you've been here before, I'm Caleb Lovelace, the Director of Education for Mastering.com. Been doing this for a while. In the last 25 years, just helped a lot of people grow and build their businesses, and have been wearing a lot of different hats in the industry myself. We have with us also today in the blue, Michael Gilbride. He's the general manager of Mastering.com. He's the reason you're all here. He's sending out the emails, hounding you with the text messages, but it's just because we want to get you out here so we can get this great information today on this Fix the Mix challenge. In the red, we have Jake Codeweiss. He's one of the mentors at Mastering.com. Love it. What is that? Is that a balloon?
That's some squeezy toy I took from my daughter.
Oh, nice. If you don't know Jake, he's been doing this a long time as well. He got signed his first record deal right out of high school. And in the last 20 years or so, he's been doing a lot with the licensing world and in education as well. He has a studio. He does a lot of mix and mastering, but he also has over 1,500 active licenses that he's done over the years. So a wonderful educator and wonderful person, Mr. Jake Codeweiss. Down in the blurry room down there, we have Dane Holmes. Dane's worked with such brands as Coke, Cadillac, Intel, Target, and a lot of several different top 10 artists in mixing and mastering and production. He was an opera singer in college. So once in a while on these Fix the Mix challenges, we do get a bit of opera. Probably not today, but Dane, wonderful
Almost.
mentor in Mastering.com as well. Have you heard Dane's opera, Warren?
No, but I want to now.
Live on Zoom.
It's pretty great.
Live on Zoom. Let's turn it over to the opera.
Yeah. Through Soyuz.
Yeah. Through the
Nice.
guitars behind him there, Mr. Rob Mazes. He's the owner, CEO of Mastering.com. You've probably seen him over the years with his videos from Musician on a Mission. And he's been a great educator, doing this almost as long as Warren. Almost.
It might actually be about the same time.
Yeah,
He's
it might
older
be
than he
about the
looks.
same.
Music,
Yeah.
definitely not.
Definitely not music. No, I might be a couple of weeks older, couple of days, couple of hours.
And then, of course, needing no introduction, Mr. Warren
Hey, Doug.
Huart. How's it going, Warren? We have
I'm marvelous.
multi-Grammy nominations, platinum records, gold records. Everyone knows him from his YouTube channel. He's been educating in this space just about as long as anybody and is a consummate pro. We're very lucky to have him today with us on this Fix the Mix challenge. We get to watch him mix live in person, ask questions. That's what it's all about. And he is, if anyone hasn't heard yet, the brand newest member of the team at Mastering.com, a new mentor. He's going to be working directly with our students starting this month, and we're very excited to have him on board. Obviously, he's going to be a great value for the students that we work with in our flagship program, the Reverse Engineer. And so to start things off, we thought we'd have him come on one of these Fix the Mix challenges and show us how to really mix some songs. So happy to have you, Warren. Thanks for coming.
Yes, people. Let's
Thank
see.
you.
35,433 in the chat for Warren.
35,400.
Oh, they're
They got to it pretty
wow,
quick.
slow. No, they're slower. That was
Slow
a lot
today.
slower than usual.
Slow today. They weren't
They weren't
expecting.
expect-
I just wanted to
yeah.
toss it out there.
Yeah.
Couple,
Nice.
couple road
Welcome
members.
aboard, dude. So awesome to have you.
Yeah, very excited to have Warren with us at mastering.com. So let's dive into this. We have a lot to cover today. Just a couple housekeeping items. You want to make sure in your audio settings that you go in and turn original sound for musicians on, and then check the boxes high fidelity music mode and stereo audio. If you don't do that in your Zoom settings, you won't be hearing this in stereo. It'll sound in mono and it won't sound very good. It'll sound low fidelity. But if you turn this on, it sounds pretty good. If you have a good internet connection, you should be hearing it at a pretty high fidelity. So turn those on. And then make sure in your chat settings, you have your chat set to everyone. What that does is it just sends your messages to the whole community so everyone can see what you're writing. If you have it on hosts and panelists, the only, only a couple of us who are on here will be able to see it. So just make sure it's set to everyone. Everyone go do those couple housekeeping items really quick. And I want to introduce to you today the sponsor for this Fix the Mix challenge, Odyssey. You may notice that a few of us are wearing the Odyssey LCDX headphones, and Warren's actually going to do the entire mix pretty much on these headphones, right? You're not really going to use the monitors. So that's really cool.
I think all of us that are wearing Odyssey headphones, by the way, are wearing them by choice. I mean, these are the headphones I've been using for the last year or two to mix on.
Yeah, amazing. It's not hard. It's not hard to have this sponsor.
Yeah, this is an easy sponsor. Yeah, yeah.
It's they're the best headphones for mixing and mastering, and you can do amazing work on them. I've only got mine recently, and I've been very surprised by how clear everything is. So we're very happy to have Odyssey as a partner for this Fix the Mix challenge, and to show that you can mix in headphones if you know what you're doing and if you utilize them the right way. There are some things you have to keep in mind when mixing with headphones, and Warren can talk a little bit about that in the next few days. But you can do it, and if you're going to do it, you might as well have a great pair that translates the frequencies properly and the dynamics properly to you in the transients. So,
hey Caleb, can I just one quick shout out thing for Odyssey specifically? So the headphones that we're working on today, that all the guys on the team have, are the LCDXs. I did also want to say for anybody, because we obviously have different price points, different people with different financial capabilities. Odyssey is putting out their MM100s as well, which is a $399 headphone, which is going to be like the best that you can get at that price point. I spoke with Odyssey yesterday. They're not in stock yet. They're back ordered, but keep your eyes out for those. For anybody who can't afford to go for the LCDXs and you're looking for something more affordable, those MM100s are going to be the best thing that you can get. So just make a note of that.
I saw
right
Bob Katz repping those one time and bragging about them. So
really,
The 100s.
yeah.
wow.
Yeah, I haven't
Okay.
tried those yet.
In Bob we trust.
And yeah.
All right. So what's this all about? What's this Fix the Mix challenge? If you're new, what's the overview for the next 3 days? Each day is going to start off with a little Zoom training. I'm going to do a little presentation. Basically, that's just going to give you a few high-level concepts, some mixing philosophy to watch for, to think about while we go through the process. But a lot of what you're going to be seeing is demonstration, live demonstration from Warren. I'm just going to start you off with some things to think about, some things that are kind of big picture concepts that'll move the needle. But a lot of what we'll do is watch Warren do the demonstration, and then we'll leave you off each day with some action items so you can take it home if there's a mix that you're working on. I believe we're going to provide these tracks for people to download, right? Is that right, Warren?
Yeah, the tracks are freely available. I'm not sure where that download link is, but they're.
We'll get them for you and post in the school community, so y'all can have these to practice on if you'd like to follow the process that Warren does. And the idea is that you get some valuable kind of nuggets out of this whole thing that improves your mixing abilities. You know, we're not going to be able to go from 0 to 100 in 3 days, but the idea is we're going to focus on the stuff that will really move the needle for you, the high level concepts that will help you the most, and within 3 days be able to drastically improve your ability to mix. That's what we're really going for. So that's the goal for the next 3 days. Help you learn some mindsets and philosophies that can help you fix your mix. So what's fun about this challenge? We aren't going to hold back. We don't believe in that. We're not going to keep some industry secrets from you or something like that. We're very transparent about giving you as much information as we can. You can ask any questions you want in the chat. We really aren't holding anything back. We really want to jam pack as much information in 3 days as humanly possible. So feel free to ask any questions, and just know that we're not keeping anything from you. We're just giving you as much value as we can. You get to watch a lot of valuable demonstration. Obviously, a huge treat to watch Warren do this entire mix live from start to finish. And again, you get to engage and ask questions and be a part of a like-minded community. So hopefully all of you are in the school community. If you aren't, Michael will probably post a link here in the chat right now. The school community is a free community that you can join, that we set up and host and paid for, so that you can be a part of, you know, a whole bunch of like-minded people where you can ask questions and share your mixes and get feedback and partner with people and network with people. Had a lot of people team up there and start working on projects together. And it's just something that we set up because we think community is really, really important. So not only do you get to be a part of the community that's on this webinar, but if you join that school group, then you can obviously go in there and start asking questions. It's a forum like Facebook where you can interact with other like-minded musicians. So hopefully you're already in there, but if not, please go join the school community.
Yeah. Also, just to address this question, replays will be posted in the school community. So if you're not in the school community, join there. I also will be sending out the replays via email later tonight. We have to, once the recordings are done and they get all uploaded and everything, I'll send those out via email. But if you want them on demand, join that school community and they'll be in there for you.
Yep. That's where you get the replays. Very important. So there are a few things that are tricky about this challenge. Obviously, it's only 3 days, so we can't teach everything in the universe about mixing and mastering in 3 days. Again, we're going to keep things really high level. We also know that everyone's at a different level, so we want everyone in the chat to be respectful of the questions that are being asked. There's no bad questions. Everyone's at a different level. Some people are beginners, some people are intermediate, some people are advanced, and we will have stuff for all of you throughout the process. I think for the advanced folks, we're going to get deeper and deeper as the days go on, and that'll help the intermediates as well. If you're a beginner, here's my suggestion for you. Definitely pull out a pad of paper or some sort of notepad, because you're going to want to take a lot of notes about some of the more simple questions that you have going through the process. There won't be time to probably stop and explain every plugin thoroughly that's being used, or a lot of the more simple questions. And there may be some things you don't understand about Pro Tools or different. There's a whole bunch of questions that are very Googleable and YouTubeable. So if it's something like that, I suggest you just jot that down. And instead of us, we won't be able to stop and really explain it all the time live here. Just Google those things, YouTube them, learn on your own, and stay focused on the 30,000 foot view, which is just looking down and getting the big picture concepts. What stuff is going to help you understand the big picture of mixing and mastering the most? That's the best you can get out of this for beginners, but you're definitely welcome here, and you can get a lot out of it if you follow that process. And feel free to ask the questions. We just may not have time to go through a lot of the stuff that is Googleable or YouTubeable. We also know that everyone has different rooms and speakers. What that means is it may not be translating. The audio that's coming through Zoom may not translate exactly the way Warren's hearing it in your room. I don't know, maybe some of you are not aware of this, but different speakers have different frequency response patterns. Different rooms resonate frequencies differently. And this is an example of what's called room modes. These are buildups and attenuations of sound waves in your room. So what happens is sound waves come out of your speakers, they bump into different walls and they collide into each other. Sometimes they boost the signal and sometimes they attenuate it. So the point of all of that is that if you don't have your room really well treated, if you're not using a program like SonarWorks and have the treatment in there, you may be hearing audio as much as plus or minus 12 dB of accurate. So there may be times where you're hearing things wrong. And I think it's important to stay out of the weeds when it comes to that stuff. Let's assume Warren is hearing things correctly with those wonderful headphones. And there may be some translation issues that you're going to have to listen on several different devices, or just keep in mind that I wouldn't get too in the weeds if something's sounding slightly boosted or attenuated in the frequency pattern, unless your room's really good. And then you can think about that. But that is a limitation. And so we're going to give you some things over the next 3 days that'll help you kind of circumvent that issue, some ways of analyzing and metering and monitoring the audio that's coming through Zoom without relying solely on your ears. It'll be something that you can connect to your eyes. So we're going to show you a little bit about how to do that so you can get as much out of it as possible. As we go forward, we'll do that. And it all kind of comes back to this principle. In addition to better learning how to mix during the next 3 days, we're also going to teach you to think like a mastering engineer. We are mastering.com after all. If any of you don't know, we have a program called the Reverse Engineer, which is a full stack program. It's a kind of program that's competing with the Berkeleys or Full Sails, where you learn everything from production to mixing to mastering. And we do it a little differently, though. In our program, we actually teach it in reverse. And there's a reason why we do this. A lot of people think of mastering as kind of like this dark art. We've been training mastering engineers for a long time, but we learned something really valuable from teaching mastering engineers for all these years that we've done that. And we'd have mastering engineers come in. These are people that are pretty good in the industry. Usually people come learn mastering last, people that have been in the industry 10 or 20 years even, and they'd come learn mastering from us. And we kept hearing the same things from these people over time. We'd often hear, I'm enjoying learning mastering. It's really fun. I think I'm getting my mind wrapped around it. But something else is happening, which is really interesting. There's something about the process of learning mastering that's actually making my mixes better, and it's even making my productions better. And we thought that was really strange. What is it about mastering that makes not only your mixes better, but even the creative process of production better? And we realized that mastering is the thing that pushes you most in terms of your skill set on the technical side of things, on the left brain, more scientific parts of music. You really have to understand that part. You have to get a better room. You have to get better ears. You have to get a better and deeper understanding of the tools. And so what we realized is that's the stuff that a lot of people miss. Even people who have been in the industry 10 or 20 years, it's really easy to sometimes skip over the technical parts, these little nuanced technical parts. And so they were coming in and learning mastering, but it was filling in these gaps, these holes in the rest of the process for them. And when I say that it was even making their productions better, what was happening is they were becoming so much better at the technical part that when it came to the production, they were more able to stay in these creative flows that happen. So you have these windows of creativity. And the better you are at controlling sound and understanding how to manipulate sound in those moments and get the sound you have in your head to come out of the speakers the way you're imagining it, the better you can stay in that creative moment. And so we went, aha, this is something maybe the industry's missing out on. No one's teaching it like this. So we built the Reverse Engineer program, which teaches not only advanced people that have been doing this for 10 or 20 years, mastering, but even if you're a beginner, even if you're an intermediate and you come in and work with us in our education program, we teach you mastering first. It sets you up for success the right way. It forces you to get a great room. It forces you to get a great ear and a deep understanding of the tools. And then we can add upon that with mixing. And then we can unlock your creative potential more when we connect that left brain to the right brain for the production phase of things. So over the next 3 days, even though we're going to focus on mixing, I'm going to take every opportunity I can to help you think like a mastering engineer. What does that mean? When you're a mastering engineer, you kind of have heard a lot of mixes. You've heard a lot of productions. And what happens is you hear which mixes are easy to master. You hear which mixes are easy to really make sound great. And then you hear all the problems in mixes that stop you from mastering something to be really great. And it gives you this perspective. It's like a reverse perspective on the whole process. You hear every mistake that was made from the very first time someone presses play all the way through production, all the way through mixing. You get an understanding of what limits your ability to master properly. So as much information that I can kind of pass on to you in the next 3 days that help you think like a mastering engineer thinks, this is stuff that's going to be able to what we call push back on your mixing and even your productions. It's going to help you think differently, a different view of mixing and production, because really when you get to mastering, there's only so much you can do. You're limited. You can't make a good mix sound great. You can only make it sound maybe better. And this will give you some insight anyway into the mixing and production process. So if I jump in the next 3 days and I'm talking about mastering, suddenly realize there's some method to that madness and there's some value there. But let's switch gears to mixing. Okay. What are we going to focus on today? We're going to break it up over the next 3 days, right? So day one, we're going to focus on session prep, editing, and initial volume balance. That's today. Tomorrow, we're going to focus on frequencies and dynamics. We're not going to focus on space. Let's change that right now.
This isn't a Star Trek seminar?
Error.
I didn't get that memo.
I
either.
thought this is...
Oh,
yeah.
no, we're still talking about space, Warren. That's just on day
Okay,
3,
good.
the final frontier, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Tomorrow will be frequencies and dynamics. So we're going to focus on your compressions, your EQs, all of that tomorrow. And then day 3, we're going to be focusing on, okay, reverbs, delays. How do we add space to this? How do we add depth and width? And we're going to focus on vocal mixing. Vocals are really, really hard. So we're having a big chunk of day 3 just be about how to make vocals sound totally pro, that industry standard, that thing you can always hear when you hear like a great record and you're like, how did they get the vocals to sound that great? Obviously, Warren knows how to do that. He's going to dive in deep with us on that and just really make that sound good. However, I want to make a point about something here that's really, really important. It's really easy to get caught up on certain things and miss kind of the forest for the trees. So of these days, which do you think is most important? And what's the ratio?
Like percentage wise, percentage. 100.
They're all important. That doesn't equate to anything. That's just 300%. That's just a nonsense number, Jake.
What the nonsense, Jake?
It's a nonsense number. That doesn't exist.
Cut it out.
I don't know, Warren, do you agree with this?
With 100?
No.
Do I agree with that?
No.
Thank you.
What's on the screen now?
Yeah, I mean, actually, you know, before we went live, I said that first part is probably 75% of the mix.
So it's even higher, maybe.
I mean, it's just one of those numbers, that arbitrary thing to say. I could agree that majority of the mix, because, well, I mean, how much you want to talk about it now or wait until we're actually starting the mix?
I know.
But for me, you make those decisions on how you're going to mix the song, because I think a quick way of doing it is like, even when I was good at mixing, I would fail to mix properly. Meaning, maybe I'd learned all these fantastic tricks of getting a vocal to sound absolutely amazing, and I started applying that to a vocal acoustic. And I've done it a million times. So there's this huge, amazing sounding vocal that's really in your face. But the backing is like strum, pick, strum, pick. So I've got this super in your face vocal because that's how you mix vocals. But it's not how you mix vocals. It's how you mix vocals for a song that has a lot of density and needs the vocal to sit forward. So those decisions are made on that first part of the process, knowing how you're going to balance things around a vocal. There is no one way to do anything. There's a million different ways of doing it. It's why I'm such a big proponent. I'm sure you're aware, if anybody's ever watched any of our videos, about talking about every genre of music, every way of working. Because if we're going to do this for a living, unless we're one of this tiny little elite, maybe in death metal or something, that can make a living doing one genre, I mean, it's really, there isn't anybody. Chris Algi mixes pop, rock, everything. Even he's not only mixing one genre. So if you think about it from those points, you need to really understand how to get into the mix that first day or the first hour or two, finding how you're going to mix the song, how you're going to do it. So yeah, 60% works for me, 75, whatever. The reality is though, it's the majority of the mix is right at the beginning. Yeah.
Yep. A lot of people skip over that. They go right to applying plugins or doing different things like that. And you've made
Oh,
your
I've
first
done
big
it all the
mistake
time.
there. Yeah.
I've made that mistake so many times myself, and even thought to myself that I know how best to mix the song before even like exploring the track. I mean, this is a big conversation. Somebody
Yep.
gives you a rough. If somebody gives you a rough, I might listen to that 10 times before I even open up the tracks.
Yeah. Well, there's a few different things in here. Session prep, which is just getting everything organized. It's efficient workflow. It's like when you're cooking. If you just rush into cooking and you start throwing things in a pan and then you realize something needs to be cut and then you realize you didn't prep this other thing and then the thing on the pan's burning. It's really easy to do that same process in mixing where you get in there, you start with the mixing, you get into the mixing mindset and then you realize things need to be edited, things need to be prepped, and then you're suddenly taken out of the mixing mindset and you go back to some earlier phase and you're disrupted. So getting everything prepped properly and edited properly up front and early is certainly important, but that's just part of it. That's just good organization, and everyone really should be doing that. There's also great power in gain and volume. Okay. Gain and volume is the most powerful tool that you have in mixing. It's not EQ, it's not compression, it's not these other things. Those are very important tools, but volume is your most powerful tool. It does the most to your mix. So what do I mean by that? Well, we're working when we're mixing in 3 dimensions of space, right? So we're thinking of depth, we're thinking of height, we're thinking of width. We want to build a soundstage for the listener that's immersive. We want to take advantage of those dimensions of space, depending on the genre and style of the song. That'll vary to some degree. And sometimes we do things with each of these dimensions that are intentionally maybe not full, for example, but we are working within 3 dimensions of space and painting with within these dimensions. And we want everything to have space and to have distance. We want everything to be balanced. We want everything to just be really immersive for the listener. And all of these have to do with volume first. Frequencies are most altered by volume. Now, we don't think of frequencies being most altered by volume. What do we think of when we think of frequencies? We think of EQ, right? But that's not exactly the truth. Volume first actually alters frequencies the most. It has the most power to adjust frequencies the most, because when you first pull up a mix, you have to think of everything, every element in the mix as something that has highs and mids and lows. They have frequencies, and they have innate frequencies based upon what kind of instrument they are. Shakers obviously are very bright, bass is very low. Sometimes synths and different guitars are kind of in the mids. So your first opportunity to paint within the frequency spectrum, this height dimension, is with your volume faders. We hear different frequencies in different spaces, right? We think of bass, it's actually, we don't always understand it as height, but it actually makes your mix grow in a vertical dimension when we adjust frequencies. When the more we push it down low, the lower it gets. And where do we experience bass frequencies? We feel them in our feet, in our legs, in our gut. We hear shakers and tambourines, the high frequencies, the stuff that's high. We feel that up in our head and above us. We feel the mids in our chest, and it's warm. This is how the listener experiences frequencies, right? And so it actually is building it out in a dimension of space that we may not always think of it as. And if we turn that on its side, then it's really just like an EQ. As we're using the volume faders and turning them up and down, we're actually affecting the frequency balance of the track more than we ever will with EQ. EQ is done later. It's used to fine tune things and micro adjust things, polish things off, make space and make room for everything. But those faders, turning up shakers and turning up bass and having those at the right level is determining the overall frequency balance of your track more than anything else ever will. And that's how we have to think of it at. Width is most altered by volume. We don't think of width as panning or volume as panning, but panning is on the volume knob, because when we turn a panning knob, we're just changing the volume from left to right. So it's a volume feature. We're painting in the width space first with panning. There's other things that affect width, but we do it the most with how we pan things in initial volume balance. We're turning things up, we're adjusting frequencies. We're also in the dimension of width the most by how we pan things initially. And then depth is most altered by volume. This one's easy to understand. just how far away things sound and how close things sound is painting in this dimension of space. Things that are farther away are quieter, things that are louder sound closer. And we have to place things. Not everything is all up front. This is what Warren was talking about. If you just have that vocal and it's just coming out, then everything else is getting lost. You're not painting effectively in that dimension of space. Something could be too loud, then you don't hear anything else. Something could be too quiet, it's getting lost. It's really important to paint in that dimension of depth, but you can also work in that dimension of depth a lot because there is space there where you can highlight certain elements and push certain elements back. You're telling a story when you're mixing, and you always want the listener's ears to focus on something that's telling the story. There's certain things you don't want to always be in. You want to push it back for a second, maybe bring it forward and have the focus go where you want the listener's focus to go as you tell the story of the mix through the process. And a lot of that is done with volume. You're bringing things out in moments and pushing them back. And it's not always having things static the whole time. It's about, again, telling that story. And that's done with gain and volume. And then even dynamics, maybe Warren can tell me how he feels about this, but this is how we teach it in the program as you get accustomed to what we do here. But I think dynamics are most influenced by volume a lot of the time too. And this is something I actually learned from Warren about 10 years ago. I think it was his second video ever. And he was talking about vocal automation, vocal gain automation. And he had a vocal up there, and he was going through, before he ever applied compressors, before he ever did anything like that, he was going through with gain automation. He was chopping certain sections and turning them up with a gain knob. He was writing in automation like what we see here, where he was going into certain big transients and turning them down. And he was going to the ends of certain words and phrases and turning them up. And all of that, he did like 2 or 3 layers of this using both manual kind of written in volume automation, using like Vocal Writer, I think he was doing that, and using a couple different gain features. Before he ever used compression, he was doing all this work. It was something I was like, wow, that's amazing. And it was something I learned early on. That's how the pros are getting that really magical volume, vocal sound, is that they're going through with a ton of intention. A compressor doesn't have a ton of intention. That's just an AI going in and making choices for you. But a vocal is such an important part generally of a mix. It's usually telling a lot of the story. And so you have to go in and be really intentional about that story. And sometimes little words and phrases at the end of words might get lost, or some certain words within the sentence get lost, and it takes the listener out of the story. You can put so much intimacy and you can put so much control of that vocal in with gain and volume automation before you ever even start compressing it. This is something that's really, really magical. It's kind of one of those secrets that I think maybe a lot of people don't understand, but it is the thing giving people that really powerful vocal sound. And obviously, since Warren taught me that about 10 years ago, he'll be doing some of that for us today and going and showing what you really have to do to provide the kind of intention to detail and intention to the vocals, especially when you use volume automation. So this is controlling dynamics. It's controlling the dynamics before it even hits compression. And I think it's not just vocals that sometimes do this. It could be other things. It could be toms, it could be drums, it could be bass. This is, again, your most valuable tool, not compression or EQ. Those are meant to refine the process later. So our goal for today, what we're going to limit Warren to, is a volume-only mix. No plugins, nothing at all, just faders and pan knobs and maybe some gain automation. That's it. And to his point, the idea is that you would get 75% of the way through. You'd get your mix sounding pretty dang good just using volume. And there's something magical that happens when you think about this way. You see, we're trying to teach you to think differently about the mix. There's a ton of intention that goes into all of this when you follow the process like this. You're using the most powerful tool to paint a picture, right? You're using the most powerful tool. And you're not just jumping in there with a bunch of plugins. But you'll notice as he goes through today, and as he is using those faders and those pan knobs, he's also making mental notes to himself of what's not being able to be solved with just volume. because that's the stuff you fix later. That means on day 2 and day 3, we can go in and actually work with more intention. You're not just thinking you need to apply a compressor to everything or thinking you need to apply an EQ to everything. You've already done 75% of the work, and some stuff doesn't need anything at all. You've already made a mental note of what stuff does need extra work. And so tomorrow and the next day, you can just have those ready to go. A lot of people write those things down. Jake, when he does mixes, as you know, he writes those things down so that the next day you go in and go, I know what already needs work, and I don't have to, get lost on everything else. So you're working with much more intention today, but you're also working with much more intention tomorrow and the third day. And that's what's really powerful about this kind of way of working. Anything to add to that, Warren?
No, it's very succinct. I agree with everything, and thanks for talking about that video. I think it was my second video. What was it called? It was called "How to Make Mix Vocals to Sit Properly in the Mix." It was very. It was like every single tip I'd ever learned about mixing vocals. I've got a couple since then, only because there's some fancier plugins that have come out. One of the things that I did a lot in those days was boosting high end and then de-essing. So what you're doing is you're brightening the whole thing up, but you're also de-essing and removing the harsh frequencies while, so it was like this combo platter. Now we have this fancy plugin by OX Sound called Soothe 2, which basically does all of that for you without having to, use multiple high-end boosts and de-essing. It's amazing.
You might want to tell Jake about that. He doesn't know about that plugin.
Jake and I are laughing, Warren, because we're people think we work for Oak Sound because we're talking about it so much.
No, I started interviewing people about 5 years ago that were talking about it before the version 2 came out. And I realized it was the constant with every single producer I knew. And then I started talking about it online, and everybody was watching me started getting into it. Before you know it, I think anybody that actually has enough disposable income, because it's not cheap, it's about $150, isn't it? It's not like a $27 plugin
now.
Yeah, but it's tough. They're really good guys. I don't know if you guys know them, but they're wonderful guys. And
yeah, I met them at NAMM.
Yeah,
cool guys.
They're young.
Yeah, very young. Yeah. I think younger than anybody here.
Yeah.
Well, that's my kind of presentation for today. Stuff to focus on and think about, this volume only mixing concept. But now it's time to turn it over to the man himself, Warren. If you want to share your screen and we can dive into this mix, and we'll just kind of follow you.
Where am I doing that from?
Share screen.
You guys ready for Warren? Give me a 2,229 in the chat if you're ready for.
You said 2,229.
I don't see commas, guys. What's going on?
Where's the share screen on this?
So it's just in the middle there, the big green.
Oh yeah, the big green thing in the middle.
And then if you go on the bottom left, just where it says share sound.
Yeah.
The little arrow, and we'll just make sure it's in stereo. Yeah, okay, cool.
Stereo, yeah.
Should be good.
And then this one here, presumably.
I would just do desktop, and then at least we'll get the whole thing. In case you open like a.
Where is our desktop thing? Okay, so I just.
And then it should,
Sure.
and that should now.
Is everybody seeing the screen? Approaching the screen?
Looks great.
Lovely. Thank you for that wonderful explanation there. It's rather good, Caleb. And I agree with all the points, really. I think I'll give you a bit of background on this multi-track and this song and this band and some context. The reason why I chose this when Caleb and I were talking about potential songs, the reason why I chose this is because it was recorded in my old studio. I used to own the studio with a friend of mine, Phil, in Hollywood called Swing House. It was a pretty well-known studio. It had 2 huge rehearsal rooms where bands would do pre-production, and we also had this massive live room, and then we had a bunch of smaller rooms for local bands to rehearse in, and medium-sized bands. So it was a wonderful experience. So I had that for about 12 or 13 years. And so we'd have like the Chili Peppers, and they'd come in for 6 months, and I did pre-production for Californication with the Chili Peppers, for instance, for 6 months before they made the record, and just had wonderful experiences over the years, getting to work with every major sort of player and you name it. And I sort of learned I was already engineering by that stage, but I also had a crash course in it by doing pre-production with huge bands that would just kind of roll in and be like, "Can you record our sessions now?" And you'd be like, "Sure." I started with ADATs, believe it or not. So even before Pro Tools. So the reason why I like using sessions from this is because I know the room inside and out. This is the same drum room, the same miking that I used on How to Save a Life, the song, for instance. So I often, when I move to new studios to record, like the other day, I think last month, I was at Warm Studios out in Austin, in Texas. And they had a great room, you know, and they had speakers that I wasn't particularly familiar with. Well, they were Trio 11s, but the way they had it set up was a little disconcerting. And so I would put on a song that I recorded there. I usually put on How to Save a Life, and I put on the last 10 seconds because it's the sound of the drums with no samples. I think there's some additional reverb on the snare, but essentially the sound of the drums in the room. So it's like an old familiar coat for me. I know how things sound in there. And there was actually a lot of intention in this recording, I will say. So I think it's worth noting that I do know this room. I do know these sounds. This is not a multi-track that's been handed to me that I've got to necessarily fix from the ground up. I think that could be good for a future one, maybe a user-generated one. Could be a good one for us to do in a future one. But I think for a crash course, the one thing you'll notice about this is there's not many tracks, not by modern standards, not many at all. And everything, and if you remove the effects that I've printed for you to use, which is the Echoplex and the stereo detuned vocal H3000 tracks, you take out those 7, you take out the Echoplex, so those 7, you haven't got much more than a 24 track going on here. I mean, take out that 7, you're at 30-ish. I could consolidate some of these. It's essentially very deliberate. Everything has a place. So I'm not throwing, if you open up these multi-tracks, I'm not giving you a delete some of these, mute some of these kind of multi-track. This multi-track is pretty much, you know, everything will be pretty deliberate. So you can focus on actually mixing it and not muting it. I learned that actually the hard way. I did an album years ago, Future Leaders of the World. I produced a band. I sort of helped. I found them with somebody else. I produced them, got them signed, and they ended up like retracking the album, but taking all my multi-tracks and tracking into it. And then Andy Wallace, the great Andy Wallace, ended up mixing the album. And when I sat in the room with Andy, I noticed that 90% of his mixing was muting all of the excessive overdubs that people would give him. And luckily, there wasn't too many, but it was a little bit like, you know, I had my stereo heavy guitars, I had my Highline in stereo, and then I had an alternate kind of arpeggiated guitar. And mind you, this is back in like early 2000s. So when, you know, it was a lot of like new metal was on the radio. And Andy was mixing probably 75% of the stuff in those days, because obviously he had done Nevermind, and he was the template for heavy rock mixing at that point in like 2000, 2001. Everybody, they either hired Andy Wallace, or if he wasn't available, they got somebody else. I mean, he was the guy. And I learned very quickly. And of course, you know, being in love with classic records, I realized, you know, intention is the way to go. So this all should be about mixing for you. This, I think, is a good multi-track to test the principles that Caleb has just explained. It's not going to be a case of, there may be some muting to do. Mutually, I might do it. You might not want to, or you might mute the stuff that that you don't like. But essentially, we can focus on all the principles that Caleb's been talking about. So with that in mind,
less tracks doesn't always mean easier either. A lot of times it just means, you know, it means you have to make everything that is in there sound phenomenal, because there's less to kind of.
Well, I think a good example to your point, Caleb, is 4 mics on the drum kit. I get that all the time.
Yeah.
You know, now everybody, look, I'm sure there's a lot of people in here that are huge Zeppelin fans, and will come back to me and say, well, Glyn Johns only used 3 mics on the drums. Well, 2 things. Only for the first couple of records. Number one, because remember, Andy took over, and Andy was microphone crazy. You know, by the time he was doing, what was the big the big Van Halen record with the acronym. Anyway, by the time he was doing like Van Halen and stuff like that, he was using like 20 mics on the kit, and he
There you
was
go.
summing stuff down. Say again? Yeah.
There you go.
So yes, early Zeppelin, first couple of records that Glenn did before Andy did, they would do 3 mics on the drum kit. But go back and listen to those records. We all love them. They're some of the greatest records ever made because of the songwriting and the performance and the recording. But there was also one guitar through one little Silvertone amp with a sort of 6 or 8 inch speaker, bass and drums and a vocal, maybe a second guitar overdub. And they were being recorded on 8 tracks. So very limited overdubs. So if you want Metallica drums and you also want, if you want John Bonham drums and Metallica guitars, there's got to be some compromises made, So having additional mics is not a problem. But a lot of the time, people hand me, to Caleb's point, less tracks, and it can be a pain in the butt because maybe it's a kick, maybe it's the snare, but then it's overheads. So out of those overheads, I've got to conjure up really good toms. I've got to get a hi-hat out there. I've got to get maybe the room sound, so you have to get pretty creative. So as Caleb's point is, sometimes less mics actually can be a hindrance. I don't mind additional mics on the drums. And then if I don't like them, I can mute them. But I'd much rather have a couple of variations that might come in than, for instance, I had like a 7 mic kit. Blanking on the name of the producer. He's now quite a well-known producer, but he gave me, it was one of his early productions, he gave me something to mix, and the overheads were just pretty unusable. He had just really, I think he had been in a studio where they had a Fairchild, and I think we've all made this mistake. We see some really expensive piece of equipment and feel like we must use it because it's there. And so he put his overheads through the Fairchild. And for those of you that have used a real Fairchild, they sound great either like, under the bridge, kind of like super compressed electric, or they sound great when they're just being tapped. And instead of just tapping it for the overheads, he was getting like 6 dB worth of gain reduction on it, and the overheads were just whoosh, 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 which would have been great on a Beatles song. That single, no attack on the cymbals, just total beautiful, long release times, great. But on the track he was doing, it was a fast-paced rock track, and so these overheads were useless. But luckily, he did top mic his toms, and so I took his tom mics and made them the overhead mics. Yeah. As well as the tom mics. So I had to separate out the toms out of it, but then he wasn't using any compression or EQ on those. And his floor tom mic coming in at an angle and his rack tom here actually became my overhead mics, as well as my tom mics. Right. So, just reinforcing Caleb's point, we really, there's a lot of mics and then there's a lot of mics and there's too few mics and then sometimes, it can be absolutely perfect. I mean, I think here I didn't triple mic the kick. I did a kick inside and I did a kick out. Sometimes I'll do a tunneled kick pulled back a bit and use like a Coles or something ribbonish. But essentially what we've got here is we've got probably a D112, the microphone that everybody loves to hate, which I still think is a wonderful mic, but it could be a Beta 52, Audix D6. Essentially, my kick in mic is usually something that's already done some of the work for me. Like I don't have to do any EQ. This would be the sound of, one of those kinds of microphones, Beta 52, D112, D6. So it's got a little bit of low end boost, a little bit of high mid bite, and a little bit of low mid cut. So let's have a listen to that. Yeah. So, there's some bleed going on in there. I'm not going to gate it. I'm not going to need to gate it anyway. The kick out, if we have a listen to that, is usually, there's going to be some bleed because it's on the outside of the head. So that, bearing in mind that first one you heard, the kick is right inside. This one's on the outside of the head. So there's going to be more bleed in there, but it'll be a lot more natural sounding.
Warren, just quickly, bring up the script on the output.
Sure. Certainly. Now that's got a lot more low end on it. a lot more low end. And that is the natural sound of, it's a large diaphragm. I didn't have anything fancy like a FET 47, but I may have actually used my only really good mic that I owned in those days, which would have been a U87. But any large diaphragm microphone. So let's have a listen to that again. Is that better for the level for everybody?
Sounds like it's not coming through. We may have shared audio incorrectly, Rob.
I can hear
It's just a little quieter than.
Really? Is it quieter than my speaking voice?
Yeah.
I put the both together. How's that?
Didn't hear much difference. Oh, people are saying it's better. There we go. There we go.
Yeah, I'm not going to play the whole track at this point.
That's
Maybe.
I think we're good.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I mean, what I could do, just to get some overall so everybody knows what we're doing. So this is the Spitfire mix. So this would have been a mix that I would have done on the SSL. So I'll bring it down because I don't know how loud it's going to be for everybody. You guys can give me a thumbs up or down for volume, but
You once lit me up like a cigarette, and you burned me down, and now there's nothing left. You were the one who put.
You could go a little.
more?
You could go more.
oh, okay, cool. Sorry, I thought I saw a thumbs up.
You were the one who put a spark to this. You were the gasoline. You were the catalyst.
So there's the track. So you know where we're coming from. That's on an SSL. I've been doing a lot of stuff recently where I've been remixing tracks that I mixed on an SSL, or on my Neve, because in this studio I had an API in my main room and I also had a Neve console in my secondary room. So I've actually mixed this song twice. I mixed it on an SSL and on a Neve, but I can also, of course, now we're going to do the quote unquote, I hate saying it, but the in the box mix. The reason why I hate saying in the box now is because I don't know a major mixer that isn't mixing in the box. So why do we have to even delineate the difference now? You know what I mean? Everybody mixes in the box now. Anyway, so you get an idea of the track. We can go back and reference it. I think I'd be interested to see people's thoughts. My first initial reaction, because I have not prepped or listened to this, is where the heck is the kick drum? Now, it's difficult because there's a floor tom playing, and that's a whole other conversation we can have later on in the mix. But I like to listen to roughs or other people's mixes before I do anything, so I have an idea. It's part of the process. If you have that rough available, definitely listen to it. Or if you have somebody else's mix that you're going to beat, don't be afraid to mix it. Don't be afraid to listen to it. I hear people say things in chats all the time to me like, I don't want to be influenced by somebody else's. I'm not influenced. I mean, I'm just going, can I beat that? How would I beat it? It doesn't shape how I'm going to, it's not forcing me to mix it in a certain way. It's just a reference point of like, oh, that's pretty good. Oh, I like that. I'll take that. Oh, I don't like that. It's not making me into a different person and making me think differently. It's just a great point of reference. So there you see, the kick without the floor tom is actually pretty good. It's got weight to it, but with the floor toms playing, they're fighting for low end. So that's the reason, just giving you some tips as to why I would reference a mix, something that I'm going to think about. Now, obviously, in the stage that we're at here, where we are doing what I would call the static mix, this is what from SSL days, what you used to call a static mix, where you're putting it up on the console. The first element that Caleb has introduced that we're going to do here with volume, I'm not probably going to be able to solve this problem. This is something because I've got low end on the floor and low end on the kick, and of course the bass guitar, there's a bit of a fight going on. It's not a fight here where there's no floor tom going on, but there is there. So I might have to that's where we might have to get clever on some automation on an EQ. and I'm not afraid to do that. So, but I'm aware of it. So it's a good practice to have a rough, because you can start mentally making decisions. All right. I'm sure that will be in your multi-tracks when you download them, so you can hear it. All right. So let's go back and create this static mix. So here's my kick in and kick out. I'm actually zooming in to look at something. So this is what I do. I like to line up, and people can use fancy plugins like the auto align. I know lots of people like that, but I'm looking at the punch here. So I'm going to make these wave files a bit bigger. Now, what's interesting is they're almost identical after the initial hit. So you see all of this lines up pretty closely. So the waveforms are matching. So the phase, the polarity is actually pretty good after the initial hit. So I'm taking a kick in and out. I'm taking a kick in on and off. But what I want to do is I'm going to look at lining up these first initial three parts of it. So what I'm going to do, and you can do it with a fancy plugin if you like, but I'm actually going to do a little bit. So what I'm doing here is if I go to, let's have a look at samples here. That is a 10, sorry, not a 10. That is like 141 samples back. So if I delayed this top one, kick in by 141 samples, let's see if that actually makes a difference that we like. It's just, these are the kinds of things I think of. It's going back to Caleb talking about what I do on a vocal before I even mix. This is something I will do on drum mics before I even mix drums. So now what I've done is I've delayed that kick in mic 141 samples. Let's see if the low end, the initial hit of the low end is better. Take it off.
Quick question, Warren, if you don't mind.
Please.
Oh, so you're delaying the entire track, right? You weren't just
Entire track, yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
There's a function in
Yep.
Logic that allows you to kind of partition off a separate set of samples. But anyways.
Yeah, you could totally do that, yeah, and different things. And of course, there's the Auto Align plugin, which I demoed a couple of months ago, which is fantastic, which will do this too. I don't do too much of that. I did enjoy it, but there's, going back to Andy Wallace, and this is a discussion point for everybody watching. Andy Wallace made a big deal out of things being sample accurate. He said, the problem with doing that is everything starts to sound small when everything is like absolutely perfect. This is probably only one or two or three times I might go into this kind of level of detail with editing. A lot of the time I let some of these things be a little wrong. Now, we could go on a massive tangent, and we'll be here for 4 hours if we do. But Moses Schneider, who many of you may know, who's a great German producer and engineer, has a ton of miking techniques which get rid of some of these delay issues, where he mics opposite directions. Like his room mics, he mics into the room, so he can have his microphones actually be closer to the source. So he'll have mics right in front of the drum kit, but he mics into the room rather than miking back, and you don't get that big pre-delay thing. And that with a vocal align, it will plug in and it will actually take the room mics and make it sound like the way he mic'd. But we could save that for a whole other seminar. All right, let's have a listen to those two elements together. I heard the low end get better. Here's it off. Now have a listen to it on.
Quite a difference.
So the initial punch is better, but the decay is probably slightly worse. I think that's a better thing for me. I don't need a lot of low end decay. One of the problems I've found with mixing, pretty much every person I've ever worked with, either on a one-to-one situation or in a group like this, is low end. People have more problems mixing low end than anything else. So what we just did by simply lining up the front part of that phase and polarity is get a nice punchy short thump. And maybe it will save me having to find a transient designer. Who knows? But we're not at that stage. All right, now let's have a listen to the snare top. It's kind of nice. Nice little bit of ring, Let's have a listen to the bottom on its own. Immediately turning it down, put the snare top in. Let's check that phase. Let's see how the polarity is between the two of them. Now, in anybody worth their salt, if their recording snare would immediately flip the under snare mic, they would reverse it because one mic is looking this way and one mic is looking that way. So if a waveform is going down, it's going to look like down this way and up on the bottom mic. So it's already been recorded with the polarity reversed. Not everybody does that. Some people don't record it like that and then end up using it on the console and they flip the polarity on the console during playback. So sometimes somebody will send you some multi-tracks and you might hear that the bottom snare mic is out of phase. And it's probably because they didn't record it flipped, but they're using it on their console or at least in their DAW. Yes, sir.
Can you bring it up? Can you bring up the trim? We'd have to add gain now. Can you do that without it clipping? Or how hot is the master fade? People are still saying it's too quiet.
Okay.
So we could try adding gain, adding like.
Well, here's basically 0. How's that? Now, obviously, that's not a dense mix, but let's throw in the kick and the snare together. What's interesting, I'm hearing a lot of floor bleed in that. See, we're discovering the song. There's a lot of floor bleed in that outside kick mic. If I take that outside kick mic off, I hear the floor in the inside mic, but not that much. Now, see, this is going back to Caleb's point. This is where we're discovering the song and how we're going to mix it. And probably why on the console mix, where I wasn't using fancy plugins, now we have fancy plugins available, but I didn't have fancy plugins on the console. It was probably why the kick seems to be an invisible, isn't really working in that floor tom section. So this is why we do these static mixes. We're making decisions based on that. All right, I'm going to go and throw in the rack now. Now, for me, I mix drums audience perspective. You don't have to. Drummers usually get quite offended when you tell them you mix audience perspective. They're like, no, you have to mix it from the drum. It's just fine. Absolutely fine. So for me, a rack is probably 20 or 30%, to the audience perspective, to the right-hand side of the drummer. Cool. Now let's go to the floor, which for me, I suppose is probably about 60% to left-hand side. Again, audience, if you're doing a drummer's perspective, you do it the other way around. Now, I'm going to notice a couple of things here. This floor tom has been quote unquote cleaned up. I think it's been quote unquote cleaned up a little bit too much, to be quite honest. This is a trick that we do quite often over the years where we gain down in between the hits. So if you see here, see this area here, you'll see that it's quite quiet compared with, say, where the rack tom is, where there's a ton of bleed. And that's a trick that we do, but it actually feels a little excessive. It's going to be hard to undo that. But I might find that I'm going to be leaning on my overheads a little bit to try and just fill in a little bit more humanity to it. But at the same time, I think doing that on the rack tom, but not as excessively, would be really good. So here's another little bit of editing we do. See how many times the rack's played. Not a lot. I think in this song, yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in this song, it's only playing in those two areas. So what happened on the floor is it would have been gained down, but I think too excessively. So let's sort of split the difference and it goes nuts. Now, I'm not sure what you were doing in Logic, but you've got clip gain in Pro Tools for those of you who use it. So you can just go in there and just gain down that section. Now, I learned from Mark Ender to do minus 18 dB, which is probably what's going on there. But as you can see, minus 18 is quite excessive. And if we listen to that, he does that because he's also using a lot of compression on afterwards. So he's thinking ahead because he's going to compress it. So that area is going to get a lot closer. So those hits of the toms and the bleed is just going to be a lot closer. So let's have a listen. That's not bad. We'll stick with the minus 18. And then what I can do, I have to make a decision on whether I want to. So I could essentially gain this down between, maybe not quite as excessively. So does everybody understand what I'm doing? I'm just doing some really basic automation to allow the
because if you just compressed a lot of this, it's not going to do what you want. You have to go in and make choices here about how you want the compressor to respond to a lot of this later, whether it's bringing it way down so that when you compress it later, it's not tons of noise being introduced, or if it's a hit that would overreact to a compressor later. Let's just turn it down now with some gain and let that compressor work more naturally with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why, you know, you go and sit in a room with Andy or any of these guys. A lot of his stuff is just getting done for them. They're getting handed tracks to mix where there's so much prep work has done. They can just bring it up if they're on consoles, just bring it up on the console and it's ready to go. And, you know, that's something, preparation is a big deal. And there isn't a lot to do on this, but it's going to be good practice for you all. And of course, you know, of course, we can just get in there and put nice big fat fades on this stuff. So you don't hear that kind of huge dip coming down afterwards. Same could be done here. I don't believe there's another single tom here. Or is it, oh, there's one here, isn't there? Yeah. So hopefully this all makes sense to everybody what I'm doing. I'm gaining down between tom hits, knowing that once it's compressed, a lot of that background stuff will come back up. That bleed will come back up. So I'm sort of anticipating that. I believe that's the last tom hit. So, yep. So the rest of this, and again, you know, go through, listen. Don't be afraid to spend 5 minutes listening down to a track, knowing where all of these kinds of hits are, because it will save you hours of work on the back end if you're like trying to figure out why a hi-hat is suddenly going in the middle of your mix. Yeah. And you're trying to figure out which mic it is, and you realize it's your tom track where you turned up the floor tom, turned up one of the floor toms or the rack tom in this instance, and the hi-hat bleed is so bad that when you turned it up. So cleaning up like this can save so many hours of work.
And then then you're taking yourself out of the mixing mindset and you're going back and editing stuff you should have just taken care of up front. Yep,
agreed, exactly. And it's not a science. So one's 17.9 and one's 17.3. It's not going to be the end of the world with that. I mean, it is science, but, you know, allow yourself some latitude. All right. So now we have some toms. We have a kick and snare. Let's see what we've got. I mean, let's put the hi-hat in and see what we got. I would go about 60%. Again, I'm doing audience perspective. So for me, that's panned right, 60%-ish. Let's go to where there's actually hi-hat playing. Hi-hat's a little hot. Bring it down a bit. Okay, throw in some overheads. Now, I want to challenge you all to listen to the overheads on and off and see what you can hear. So here's the overheads on. Overheads out. There's two big differences with the overheads on and off for me. Number one is obviously there's some ambience coming in because the overhead mics are backed off, so I hear a bit of ambience. Not bothering me at all, but you definitely hear more ambience. Not a big deal for me. If I wanted it to be dry, I might be, wanted a really super tight 70s drum sound. I probably would have put baffles in when recording it anyway, but otherwise maybe a transient designer or something like that, we could have a bit more fun with it. But essentially speaking, the biggest problem for me, to be quite honest, is that I lose the body of the snare. Put the overheads in. Can you hear that through Zoom? Some of the low end of the snare is disappearing.
Yep.
So why is that? That's because, oh, look, 100% phase cancellation. Look at that. Look at the overheads there. They go right in. You see that?
That'll do it.
So a couple of things to do. Some people will actually just flip the polarity on the overheads. In fact, I know people that record their overheads flipped like that. To me, it's like I want to keep everything in the same phase relationship. So actually what I'm going to do, I want to drag the snare back. Again, you could do that with some fancy plugins, or you can just simply, do time adjuster, which is what I'm going to do. So again, I'm on samples and it is telling me it's 132. That's, I haven't got the zoom in tool. So it's telling me up here, there's 132 samples. So why don't we just try that quickly? So I'm going to grab the time adjuster. Again, you can do it with a fancy plugin with auto align. What is the function you can do that again, Dane? How would you do that in Logic for the Logic users?
The marquee tool is, I believe, would give you that same functionality. But I don't record enough live drums to honestly worry about this stuff. So
Okay.
yeah. Is it easily Googleable?
Little note for people. A few people in the chat are going, the tom sounds a little muddy, or the overhead sounds a little muddy. Here's the first temptation that comes along when you're mixing.
We're not getting there yet.
Okay, because it's easy to go, oh, I need to fix that now, but you don't have any context yet. You're not even hearing it in context with everything else. You're not even thinking about it from a global perspective yet. Again, this is only volume. We're only working with volume. So what you'd do is you'd make a note of that, but you'd also want to listen to it later because in context, it might have a whole different relationship to the rest of the mix. So this is
Absolutely,
why you compartmentalize this process. It gives you more intention now and more intention later when you get into the EQ and compression.
Warren, quick question for you. Why do you do a
Certainly.
time adjust plugin instead of scooching the region?
Because I'm superstitious, I like everything to be where I recorded it.
Fair enough.
But you can do that. If I was to do that, then what I'd probably do is just take all the drums as a group, which we're going to create, obviously, a group of the drums, and duplicate it.
Yep.
So there's a playlist untouched. You get yourself into all kinds of trouble. It's a bit like when you're editing drums and you accidentally go out of group, and before you know it, your snare's in a different place, half the song, and then the other half, it's chopped into 5 different pieces. I get sent stuff all the time to mix where I'm just like, what is going on? The
Yeah.
drums sound different in different sections because they've scooched things around and yeah. You can definitely do it. And, you know, I would consolidate, say, for instance, these rack edits here before getting into any of that kind of stuff. I rarely, but I do, but I rarely edit outside a group. The times when I've edited outside a group is usually when it's a 4 on the floor groove, because you've got a kick, you've got like a disco groove going, and you've got that kick going. And where the kick and the snare relationship isn't quite perfect, you know, it can sound pretty bad and flammy. One of the advantages of being able to edit out a group with a kick drum is essentially most of it's the low end. Now, don't get me wrong, there is some snap in there, which may well be in your room mics and stuff like that. But essentially, you can get away with murder on a very fast 4 on the floor, 16th note kind of groove, because you can take the kick and edit that tighter to the snare, and then the snare and everything else remains in the group. But with that exception, I rarely edit drums outside of group. I'm just superstitious with that because it can cause all kinds of nightmares. And like I said, I've been sent stuff that's been edited multiple different times, and there's nothing consistent. The kick in the first half of the song is in a different phase relationship to the overhead, and then it's been heavily edited in a section, and it's different every other beat. You know, it's like so. Out of superstition, I don't do that. But you know, if for those people that feel secure in their knowledge of moving around, sure, I go for it.
Yeah, that's and we talked about that before, guys. That's just preferences between destructive, non-destructive, right?
Yeah, totally.
50 net.
So here's the overheads and the snare as they were. Now here's with the time adjuster on, nudging it back. Off. It just brings in like 80 to 100 hertz on the bottom of the snare to about 150, 200. Just gets a little bit more lows on that snare and just a little bit more body. And, you know, I've talked about this a lot over the years. You know, I have the 1% rule, make everything, this is more than 1% better. But if you made every single element of Mix 1% better, it's by the end of it, it's going to be amazing. All right. So now we've got our toms, we've got our hat and everything in. Let's see some of these fun mics that I did. So this one's called a room cymbal. So what I did is it's a cymbal in front of the drum kit, right in front of the drum kit, mic'd. So it's actually micing reflected sound. It's a John Leckie trick. It's very Benz, for those of you that are fans of Radiohead, very Benz drum sound. I mean, you could pretty much use that for 90% of the drum mix. If I put all these mics back in, for instance, and focus on that quite heavily, which it is already doing. It's got that kind of trashy mid-90s energy of a room. Take it out.
It's
Sorry, Caleb.
no, it's amazing how much kind of bite and brightness that technique gives. That's really cool.
So we'll just tease it in there for a bit of energy. It's also really good if you've got a song, and maybe in this song, for those of you who want to get adventurous on a mix, or maybe you want to break it down to like a small mono drum mic sound, because there's not a huge amount of lows in it, and you maybe want the verses to be a little bit more stripped down. That's a very Eric Valentine trick. One of the things that Eric does is very subtle amounts of drastic EQ. Subtle amounts of drastic EQ. So what he'll do is he'll take a verse and wipe everything below 80 hertz off of everything. And so his kick drum still feels normal. You're listening to the song on the radio, still sounds like pretty much everybody else's song. But when the chorus comes in, boom, the full low end below 80 hertz comes back in. And it's just like, whoa, what happened there? It's the same trick as like using LCR techniques of having all the guitars left and right and all of the, the drum, the kick, the snare, the bass, and the vocals down the middle. But what happens if you keep your guitars to like 20 or 30% left and right in a verse? Imagine that with low end removed, not a massive amount, and then suddenly the chorus comes in, boom, it gets super wide, low end comes in bigger still, and that chorus is like, whoa, what happened? Eric does that a lot. And he also does it with high end as well. He does low passing. So it hasn't quite got that full kind of like 10, 11, 12. He's dipping 10, 11, 12 out of everything. And then when the chorus comes in, all of that opens up again. And suddenly it's just bigger, it's brighter, it's wider, there's more low end. And everybody's like, whoa, you made the chorus pop. Well, he didn't really. He made everything else slightly smaller. But it gives that illusion. Yeah.
Contrast.
So
guy.
it's not... Contrast, yeah. I like, because my father was an artist. He was a painter and a sculptor. It's for those of you that are into art, it's a technique called chiaroscuro, which means light and shade in Italian. So it's like for those that are into their religious Renaissance paintings, it's like where Rembrandt was a strong proponent of it. It's like, there's Jesus sitting there, showing off the stigmata, in his hands and everything. So the light comes in through the window and highlights him only, and everybody else is in dark candlelight. So it's that ability to go light and shade, like, whoa, that comes out of nowhere. I love that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun.
Somehow that term got worked its way into my days at school with opera. So
chiaroscuro? Well, yeah.
Even
with anything,
it's everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's light and shade. Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? Because it's Italian, and the Italians are, I suppose, secondary. I mean, Italians first, and then obviously secondary. The Germans pretty much own opera, with the exception of like Gilbert and Sullivan and stuff like that. Marvelous. Yeah, I grew up on a lot of Verdi and Puccini and stuff. My dad would play that all day, every day. Okay, so now I have two sets of room mics here. I have the close ones, which are actually behind the drums, believe it or not, miking the wall. Let's listen to those in solo, so you have an idea of what they're doing. Honestly, they're really good. I'm spoiling you with this one because those are really nice room mics because they're measured as an equilateral triangle to the snare, so they're the same distance away from each other as they are away from the snare. So it's quite an accurate stereo version of the drum kit.
Behind the drummer.
Behind the drummer, yeah. Miking the reflection of the wall, and And we had carpeting on the lower part of the wall because we were idiots, so we didn't know what we were doing. But it worked out really well. We just kind of made this room up. There's I think it's the second Audio Slave record where the back cover is this huge blue stage with a band in it. That's the room. That's
Cool.
the room. Audio Slave did it there. So quite often what I'll do is just tease a little bit of kick and snare into something like that. Might be fun for you guys and girls watching to sort of experiment, because you can make your own drum sound. There is no one way to mix this. So we could do the kick out, for instance, which has a lot of low, snare top on those rooms. See what we've got. What we got is flamming. Because we have delayed that snare top. So take this off. Maybe we need to delay it more. It's a little flammy, but I've mixed with that before quite a lot of times, just been selective. And I personally don't have a problem with using a lot of mics because you don't have to use them all. We could do the Glyn Johns, see what it's like. We're going to do kick. We're going to do kick. Let's do kick and snare top and overheads. So I brought the overheads up dramatically. Got to kick in. It's a little bit more flamming than I anticipated. I wonder if we have to do a Pro Tools restart. No, it's just it's a little bit of the tom bleed from the overheads because they are quite a long way away from the toms. But yeah, that's the point. That's what I love about having a lot of mics is I can choose what I want and how I want the drums to sound. And again, that's the fun thing about mixing. We can sculpt and we can go, oh, let's make it really super close in the verse here. Let's make it more bombastic in the choruses. Let's, that's the beautiful thing about it. Now, the last pair of microphones are far rooms, and this is not glamorous at all. This is a pair of 57s miking the walls on the very largest part of the room. Oh, and by the way, the band's recording live, so you can hear bleed from all of the different ISO booths. Now, it's a tough one. They are not in any kind of phase relationship. You can hear the snares leading slightly more right than it is left, so we could maybe pull that in a bit. That's pretty close. So I've now got it about 60% right turned in a bit, and now the snare's a bit more central. They're just generically thrown against walls, but they're fun. And again, could be used in a special way. So here's all the rooms together. I could argue that could be your drum mix, and then you could just mix a song that's a little bit more organic and mid-90s kind of room mic-y drums like everything was in those days. Okay, let's throw in. Now, the next thing I'll do is create groups. But let's just listen to what we have so far. Great. I mean, we haven't done, so let's just create some groups. So we'll just take those two kick elements and call them, you guessed it, kick. I know, revolutionary concept.
Aptly named.
A snare. Often I'll take the overheads and the hi-hat and make them one. I do on the console. I always put those through a pair. So we could just call that cymbals generically. And then the same thing with toms. And the reason why I do this is because if I'm going to end up sending these to separate auxiliaries, I can just take a setting and do it on both at the same time. And if I'm reaching for something quickly to turn up the kick, then the kick is together. We're going to create auxiliaries. We're going to bust things together. We're going to do all that kind of clever stuff, but that's in stage 2 of the master plan. Now, when we did this, because there's a lot of guitars, I ended up overdubbing cymbal hits. And the reason why I did that is I just felt like in the final mix that I needed just a little bit more excitement on the downbeats. So at the moment, we can just kind of bury them in there because we don't know how much we're going to use of them, but there are 2 cymbals for those of you that are looking at the multi-tracks. Just adds impact. And again, maybe if we listen to the overheads quickly. So it looks like he's hitting his left-hand cymbal, our left hand, his right hand cymbal quite dramatically. So let's think. Maybe we balance it with a little bit on the left. I have it pan 30. Remember, let's go left. So let's go to the right-hand side. Okay, and there's a little 10-inch splash. Quite offensive, isn't it? Let's bring that down. Just a little
Dude. Just kidding.
big rock moment with a 10-inch splash.
Just threw it at you.
Cool. So a little trickle of extra cymbals there just for it. Again, we'll have a better idea of exactly how loud we will or won't need that once we get some guitars and stuff in there. Okay, so there's a tambourine. Now, the way I mix tambourines or shakers is opposite whatever the main driving high end of the drums is doing. So what do I mean by that? If it's the verse and he's playing a hi-hat, then I'm going to put the tambourine the other side of the hi-hat. If it's a chorus, which in this instance, it sounds like is he riding the cymbal? No, because he's doing the floor. Let's keep listening. Okay, so there's tambourine playing here with on the second chorus with a really aggressive hi-hat. So let's put the tambourine opposite the hi-hat. That's how I make my decision. So I've got high end of a hi-hat here. Tambourine or shaker is going to go opposite it. Otherwise, I'm just piling a lot of high end on the same side. It's not going to give me any width. Cool. Again, goes back to Caleb's point. We're listening down. We're making decisions before we do any EQ or compression. We're already kind of shaping everything about the mix. Now with the bass, interesting. Looks like it's just DI and Sans amp, which is unusual for me. I would have thought there had been an amp. Nope. All right. It's been known to be done. I may have done this as an overdub after. Maybe I retracked the bass and wasn't happy with the live amp performance. It's possible. This is 2 albums back with them, so I don't specifically remember. 2 things. Just create a bass subgroup. Bring them both down. So the Sans amp is driving pretty heavily. Got emojis coming up there.
You on there?
So just the Sans amp.
Great bass tone.
It's good. I think it's his precision. I have a lot of different basses, but I think he had a nice. These guys were from Boston, and I met them when I was working with Aerosmith in Boston, and I went to one of their shows with actually Brad and Tom from Aerosmith, which I think completely freaked them out. Can you imagine being like 21 years old and this guy you're talking to produce comes in and brings 2 members of Aerosmith in? They were just like on stage like this, because there was like 8 people in the club. So it was like 25% of them were multimillionaires.
Yeah.
So the Sans amp's pretty trashy. Probably too trashy for what I would normally have done. Who knows how this slipped by? But totally usable for energy. I don't know how I keep turning this emojis on. Maybe I just want to send you unicorns, everybody.
The industry secret.
Yeah. Industry secret. Use unicorn emojis. But that is a good tone. That's a really good tone. So I could use the Sans amp for a bit of disgusting energy. So what I'll normally do, we won't do it now, but what I'd normally do is I take the DI, we'll do it when we mix the bass properly, and I separate it into 2. And because I don't have an amp tone, and I would use one half of the DI for super clean low end. Typically, I get my low end from a DI. There are ways I've recorded over the years. So I'm sure we do other ones of these. I'll demonstrate that, where I do the Jeff Emmerich technique, where I use an 18-inch or a 15-inch speaker to mic another 15-inch, and that gives you excessive low end. It's Taxman. That's a 18-inch speaker miking an 18-inch speaker. That's how he gets that low end on on Taxman. So there are songs I've done and that have that principle, but this one we'll just go with the DI. Let's throw in. I'm gonna create an everything drums. So it's just gonna be my drums group, all group, so I can quickly turn it on and off. Perfect. I mean, that's good enough for me for what we need.
That
Now let's
DI,
start.
was that direct into the interface, or did that come out of the back of a head, or did it go through a DI box?
Good question. That in those days, that would have been my tube Demeter. That was the trendy early 2000s. This wasn't early 2000s, it was after that, but that was the trendy DI. We're going through a lot of different trends at the moment. People love the what's it called? The red DI. I use that a bit.
Red.
The one I love is the Acme. Is the Acme one, which is the Motown DI, which has a transformer that you pick up the DI box. It's like weighs a ton. It's got this massive transformer in it.
Press it. Yeah.
I really like that. And Acme also make Al Sutton also makes the tube version of that. So has a tube stage and the massive transformer. Obviously several massive transformers being tube valve based. I'm in England now, sorry. Valve.
You gotta say valve.
Yes. Back home, I gotta but I've used Countryman's, and sometimes we've done blind. When we were doing the second Fray record, we did a shootout with Dan Rothschild, who came in and replayed all the bass because the bass player that had wasn't good. So Dan Rothschild came in and replayed it, and we did a shootout without him telling us what DI was using. And we had my Demeter, we had radials, it was before Acme's, but we had the Countryman, and everybody kept going, that one, number 3. And he's like, that's the Countryman. And that still is kind of an industry standard and very affordable. I think they're like $100 or less. And they're just a passive, does the job DI. So, you don't always have to spend a lot of money to get good sound.
Yeah,
all right. So now we have these intro guitars. So they only appear on the intro. Now there's an acoustic here. It's very, very quietly recorded. So I'm just going to bring it up a little bit. So I'm clip gaining it up. Whatever gain plugin or function you have on your DAW will work wonders. I'm actually not sure why it's a stereo track. That may have been done for DAWs, for people that have stereo tracks on the DAWs. I would say you could literally just go in and, make that mono. Yeah. If you want to make it mono, I'll keep it stereo as we like, but it's not a stereo recording. Then underneath that, it's clearly an electric. That's probably a Les Paul through an AC-15. It's got that mid-range. I love AC-15s. Throw in the acoustic. Probably going to keep this fairly mono. I don't know what I did on the original because I want to have that flamming snare when it comes in and make it more exciting. Let's play. We'll quickly play the rough so you boys and girls know what I'm talking about. See, I've got that quite stereo. I think it should have been mono.
Spark till this, you were the gasoline, you were the catalyst.
So let's exaggerate that a bit. Let's keep it mono, maybe make it slightly panned, but at this point, let's keep it mono and, you know, see if we can use that as a moment to make it a bit more impactful. So when that snare comes in, maybe we'll, you know, later on the mix. And these are things I'm thinking about, obviously. This is why we're doing this process. As Caleb was illustrating, this is how we learn the song. I'm already thinking to myself, let's keep it a little bit more mono. Let's put maybe a big reverb on that snare so that when the band comes in, it's a dramatic moment. So let's have a listen to what else we've got. And then the second one. Oh, so it's a Nashville tuning. So I've got 2 Telecasters. I've got one regular recording. Again, probably through the Vox AC15. And then I've got a Telecaster with Nashville tuning, which is the high strings of a 12-string guitar on an electric. Both together. Throwing the acoustic. With a little lead part. That might be too mono. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go split into mono. So this is what I'm going to get rid of all of those stereo tracks. I think they're superfluous. I think, again, it was probably going back to when we were doing something for DAWs. There are some DAWs, I'm sure you guys off the top of your head know better than I. There's some DAWs that always take stereo tracks, which I've never understood. But so I'm going to make those inactive and hide. Okay, so now we have the same principle, those 4 tracks, but all mono. And I think what I'm going to do is just make them sort of mono. So like 20% here, 20% there. So we can still have that impact of when the full band comes in. No science here, just see if we can make it a little wide, but not too wide.
There's nothing left. You were the one who put a spark to this. You were the gasoline. You were the catalyst.
Cool. So you see what we're doing. You know, even that, just where we're at, had massive impact. You know, nice, quiet, kind of pretty, little trashy, kind of like indie rock thing, and off you go. Okay, so there are some big guitars about to come in. Let's have a quick listen, see what we've got. Oh, I think we do have 24 tracks or less actually. Because I've given you DIs as well for those of you who want to have some fun, and maybe, you know, if you're into amp sims and stuff like that and you want to mess with tones, you've got the DIs available to do that. I also like using DIs for silliness. Like quite often, especially if I've got like a very heavy electric guitar, if I've got a DI I printed, so I have an amp track that I recorded in a DI, I might use the DI for reverb. We can talk about that in a later one. The reason is then instead of this mushy guitar and putting reverb on it, which will literally just be a mushy mess, I take the DI, which is super clean, and have that be the reverb for the heavy guitar, and it is awesome. It's a great trick. It's a variation of what Andy Wallace does, where he takes the snare sample, which he may or may not use loud or not inside of the mix, but uses the snare sample to trigger the reverb, because then you don't have the snare top with all the hi-hat bleed or tom bleed or whatever also triggering reverb. You just use the sample for it. And quite often I've done things where I've taken a snare sample and triggered reverb and not used the snare sample in the mix. So the reverb is its own unique thing behind the snare. So I'll do that often with DIs. So So we're going to just keep the DI muted for the time being. And let's just listen to what electrics we've got. It looks like we have 2 main electrics here. Yeah, that's louder than a loud thing on National Loud Day. Pan them away from each other. That's for the English. That's my Blackadder. Just listening on for a little bit. So this second guitar that was muted is probably going to offset this. I don't think actually we're going to go super wide. If we do go super wide, I might cheat. Sometimes in these situations, I will take a guitar that's been recorded and double it on itself. And I don't mean just double the track, but take the same part from a different part of the song and put it at the front. I'm not sure yet. We might have a triple layer. What we might do is have the small mono intro, a fairly big intro when the band comes in, but then saving back for when the chorus comes in and makes it absolutely massive. So I might just keep it like this at the moment. So I'm actually narrowing these to like 50-50, around about that area. Let's have a listen to what that sounds like. Oops.
Put a spark to this, you were the gasoline, you were the catalyst.
It's interesting. This guitar always felt like really, really loud. Now the drums are in there. You're like, where did it disappear to? Again, you know, what Caleb was saying, it's like making a decision based on how something sounds in solo is not smart. And, you know, there's only one mixer I trust with this phrase, because I've been in a room with Andy, I've been in a room with Crystal Algie, I've been in a room with Mark Ender, I've been in a room with everybody. And the only mixer that I've been in a room with that never soloed once was Bob Clearmountain. Never, once, never soloed, never went anywhere near the solo. And I said to him afterwards, I said, do you ever solo? And he sort of looked at me and goes, no, I never solo. And when you listen to his mixes, sometimes the drum sounds are quite offensive if you want to actually solo his snare. Like I heard like a little extra of like cymbal bleed going into it. But then when I listen to the whole drums in it, it's just pure excitement. So it's a tough one, you know, it's that balance. We're soloing here for educational purposes and talking about it, and definitely really good to build it up. And I do think it's a very important part of the tuition here. But I think as you get better and better and better and better at this, you might just, you know, in a imaginary console world, play the files and start balancing out those volumes as you go. The better and better and the more you get used to this. But don't expect to do that immediately, trust me. But Bob does. He just makes everything sound good together at all times. And his mixes don't sound like anybody else's. They're very unique. It's all just girth, isn't it? It's so loud when it's at 0. You know, if I put this at 0, even at 0, it's him in the mix. Now it's like the loudest thing in the mix. It's still only just a little bit loud. So again, definitely a good illustration of why you make these decisions in context. Where of course this wailing guitar, even though it was pulled down considerably, you know, it's loud. It's all mid-range. That is going to be a definite one that I'm going to want to use the DI and put reverb on it. I think that'll be awesome in this instance. Okay, let's keep listening. So I'm going to take this really great grunge guitar and pan it 40% away. So it's going to end up being automated because when the choruses come in, I'm going to go wide left and right on this guitar because it's balanced with the pink one above. I love his guitars. They're so ugly. I can't remember what pedal we used. It may have been a Big Muff, but it's definitely like an ugly distortion. I had a good time of using small amps with pedals rather than using big kind of 50 or 100 watt heads. The Wailing guitar is definitely a Pro Junior, but this is,
There you go.
yeah, amazing amp, like amazing amp. Probably one of the most recorded amps of all time. Mike Campbell has a pair of Pro Juniors in a case, in a road case with 57s on the front. And I don't know what live it looks like he's using, but that's what he's actually using. And these guys are huge Tom Petty fans, so it's no argument. So let's hear that in context.
Another night on Sunset Boulevard.
Let's take out the vocal for a second. It's just confusing the issue. I'm dying to have some fun with this because we've got that printed with delay on it, but we've also got, let's have a listen to the DI. Like nothing. So we could like use the DI and recreate the delay with that and ping pong it left and right and have the distorted crazy track actually just as an energy underneath. That's the wonderful thing about having DIs. And the occasional harmony coming in. Now, what is typical for those of you sort of paying attention to the blends there is that when the drum parts become a little bit harder to play, he doesn't hit them as hard. So it's a little unfortunate because you've got, he was a young drummer. The singer and the drummer were brothers. If you listen to the kick and snare, let's go out of group. Let's go back into group. So you'll hear the energy level where it should go up actually comes down. I mean, you can visually see, I don't care about looking. If you can visually see, he plays the kick softer and the snare softer when he gets into that Motown beat. I did, when I did this album with him, I spent about 10 days, a week to 10 days in pre-production. And this wasn't, a lot of these sections were new to him and this way of thinking and playing. So, probably automation's going to come in here. We're going to push the kick and snares a little harder in this section, but you probably noticed the drums sort of disappeared a bit when the heavy guitars came in, where typically if he was more au fait, more familiar with this, he probably would have dug in heavier. He just wasn't familiar with it. And again, another good reason why we are listening to the tracks like this. These are the mental notes that we're making, that we're going to have to push this a little harder. It's getting a little wimpy there, but unfortunately the guitars don't get wimpy, they get the opposite. So mental note for mixing, and the same thing is true of the choruses, although he's probably a little overwhelmed. There's not much he can do because the guitars get massive there, and that's where mixing magic comes in, where we're actually going to obviously introduce more energy to the drums than they're actually there, because the guitars get massive. No shortage of hi-hats. Of tambourines. Bring that down. Cool. So we're going to have to get into, when we get into automation, automation is going to be key here, because we need to get those guitars that I've currently got panned for the verse out wide. We're doing the static mix here, but we're learning about the song. We're not doing automation at the moment, but that is a definite sign of, like, we need to do automation there, because the kick and the snare and the lead vocal, the heavy guitars come in. If they're going to be panned like 30, 40, 50% either side, it's going to eat up all that energy. They need to get wide and out of the way. Plus, it will help the impact of the chorus, obviously. Again, all part of the learning of the song. Okay, so there's a solo here. Let's go up to that. Again, I think a lot of that decision making will be made. Oh, it's just a slide. This could be another great one, because we have the clean DI. That could be smothered in verb and really make this super dreamy, I'll just illustrate, even though it's not part of what we're doing, but I'll just illustrate what I mean, because I'm talking a lot about it. I can just get... So we've got the verb coming from there. Let's bring it up. So you've got this really clean verb, but then throw in the distorted slide. Other thing is you get the punch of that attack from the DI as well. It's just fun things to do. Yeah, so I love having DIs for things like that. Particularly good for effects.
Is there any other effects you might do that with, or is it pretty much just reverb?
Oh, reverbs, delays, octaves. Oh, that's so good. You take a DI and take it down an octave and have that trigger reverb an octave lower. You take like a thin guitar and you're struggling with it. You put a little verb on it and you're like, oh, I can't get it to bite. Take the DI, drop it down an octave, then have it trigger the reverb, and suddenly it's got energy behind it. It's awesome. It's really, really cool. I love doing octave stuff anyway. Sometimes taking a snare and taking it down an octave and having that trigger the reverb, so you get the whoosh, whoosh. Yeah, that's a fun thing. Just things that were so difficult to do when you were mixing on consoles, and also, when you don't have that many things to really mess with, you've only got, 3 guitars, bass, drums, a vocal. What can you do, to make things a little bit more sonically interesting, especially if people are, using the same amp and the same guitar in every part, which, is a reality for a lot of people. They don't necessarily have a huge microphone collection, huge amp collection, huge, so they're limited to what they've got. You can have some fun, just pitching things, either slightly or dramatically, octave up, octave down. I like doing octave up on things like thick sounds, because then the reverb that creates is like really shimmery over the top. Yeah. Okay, so next up is the organ. Oh, we've got all of our H3000 going. That was interesting because I unmuted it. So I'm just going to go out of my drum group for a second and just do some dumb stuff, like bring up the kick.
It was last call. It wasn't you, it was the alcohol. We talked all night, but
So I think we're in a good place. It is interesting when we get to the other sections of the song without the panning happening on the guitars. The drums are just getting smothered. We have to be very, very aware of that. Well, if you're listening, you're going to hear it. There's some high passing that in general just needs to get done. That will help. The organ in particular has a lot of low lows on it, which are fantastic, but they're eating up energy of the bass guitar, of the guitars themselves. The guitars need some high passing on them as well. High passing is your friend. There was a terrible series of videos that used to go around YouTube about 7 or 8 years ago, where people suddenly got into the latest trend of saying don't high pass, which is one of the biggest BSs ever. Because actually, if you've got a lot of instruments with excessive amount of low end, you actually get huge cancellation in low end. You don't get more low end. You get this mud and you don't get definition. But if you create space for a bass guitar to live in, for instance, you're going to get it blooming and it's going to sound so much fuller than if there's a guitar with too much low end. And you just got loads of low frequencies that are just canceling each other out, and it just turns into mud. It was an interesting, I think David actually started it, David Nozzi, because he did a video called Stop the High Passing Madness. He changed the title. He didn't get rid of the video because it has like 1 million views. So, but he changed the title.
It's so easy to take it too far in the way.
Oh yeah, you can take it too far. Yeah, you don't want to go up to like 300 hertz on everything, but you don't need 80 or 100 hertz on pretty much any guitar unless you're doing some kind of death metal. And if you clear 80 to 100 out,
I generally hate any sweeping statements. Period. It's like there's always
Sure.
situations where you might not need to high pass them, right? Like you want some more natural.
Yeah, but if it's a single piano and a vocal, yeah, why?
Exactly.
I would high pass the vocal, definitely. I don't want to hear like the foot rumbles and stuff like that, or air conditioning noise on a solo vocal against a piano. But if it's just a piano, of course, when they're hitting like a low C, I want to hear my whole stomach rumbling with it. Definitely, yeah, without a doubt. But a piano inside of a rock mix, I don't want anything below 150 or probably even 200 half the time, because I have a bass guitar player. Why do I need another bass guitar player fighting with the bass? So that it can't be sweeping because it's all about context. But I might also have octaves on a piano which have a lot of super low end to reinforce guitars that need the low end that wasn't in there. So it's definitely no sweeping statement. But yeah, that sweeping statement of stop the high pass madness was
pretty hard.
Caused a lot of stuff. And every mastering engineer I interviewed at the time was just telling me that they were getting the worst mixes. They were like, what is happening? We're getting people sending us mixes and we couldn't pull out kick drums and bass guitars anymore because it was just all of this low end. It's amazing, especially about 8 years ago, where I think there was so few channels that there was 4 or 5 people teaching mixing, and if 3 of them all came up with the same silly idea, everybody started thinking it was real. It must be right. You know what I mean? Now, of course, everybody that's ever recorded or mixed anything, even for 10 minutes, has their own YouTube channel. So it's quite different. There's more competition in that realm, essentially.
How do you know who to trust?
I think it's just comes down to consistency. Most of the people that I think came up in the pandemic, a good 75% of them just kind of fizzled out when their promised $1 million they were going to make a year didn't happen. People that do this and stick at it are doing it for the right reasons. I think it's as simple as that. I think like anything in life, yeah, you keep coming back to the people that keep working it hard and really believe in what they're doing. But yeah, during the pandemic, it was like, whoa, everybody I'd ever met had a YouTube channel. Okay. I mean, I'm pretty happy at where we're at because now I'm beginning into high passing. The only thing we can maybe look at is what I might want to do on some of the vocals. Let's have a quick listen. I'm going to solo the vocal.
You once lit me up like a cigarette and you burned me down and now there's nothing left.
Now with his vocal, I'm already hearing things. Obviously there's a lot of wah, wah. There's like 400, 500, 600, 700 build-ups in those kinds of mids. Definitely a lot of 670, 680. I've always been pulling that out of his voice. I know it really well. But the other things I would always do here, is just get in here and take S's and ends of phrases and just gain them down. Because whatever I do compression wise to even it out, I don't want to exaggerate these S's and things too much. You know, there are many ways to EQ. One way to EQ is to keep cutting and cutting and cutting. And if you go to gear space, that's what they will tell you to do. Never boost. And yet I've never met a mixer that cuts only. Everybody boosts. That's what we do. And of course, the cut and boost is the same thing, as we all know. If we go and grab an EQ, let's go for a generic, which for me would be REQ. If I go and do that, I just cut everything below 1368 frequency. So I've now cut, because all I've done is turn it up. So if I now go, oh, I better bring that down by, because it's got too loud, I better bring it down by 5.3. All I did was, I did the same thing as boosting as cutting. So, it's especially in a digital world where these, REQs or the Fab Filter ones, they don't add any sound. They are completely and utterly neutral. They're not coloring the sound at all. So boosting and cutting is ultimately the same thing. And a lot of, almost every mixer I've ever met will boost into compression to get spankiness out of it. There's a whole other discussion we can have when we start getting into EQ. But ultimately, I will always take stuff like that, because if I do want to, let's be a little bit more judicious with this. If I do actually want to, come in, I don't know, around about here, boost a bit of high end, just generically like this.
Pack a cigarette.
That's cigarette. So that cigarette, as it was before, I can do this.
Pack a cigarette.
Is going to end up taking your head off with a couple more kind of high end boosts. So that's why we are preparing it. We're prepping it, as Caleb was discussing. And I'll listen in solo. We can take that EQ off, so we're not talking about EQ at the moment.
Burn me down and now there's nothing left.
It's a tough one. Some of this stuff I love.
Left.
That might be more than I need, but the ends of phrases are really great to grab.
You were the one who put a spark to this. You were the...
See there, quite often in clean up vocals, what I'll do is I'll go to Audio Suite. I'm not sure what that is in, say, Logic, but here at Audio Suite is just where you can affect the track itself. So what I could do is go, well, I don't want anything below, say, 130 where that P is. So I can just highlight the whole area. So that's the pop. And then I can just do that. Crossfade it super close to where the low end is. So it's about here. Just put a fade in. And now it's time to listen.
One who put a...
Now I've got a putter as opposed to a putter.
One who put a...
So this is the sort of detail that Caleb was pointing out that I would do on vocals. I'll take down the S's manually. And before the advent, I know everybody loves this plugin, but before the advent of Soothe 2, de-essing was a case of trying out 3 or 4 different de-essers to see which one sounded the best on the vocalist. Sometimes running 2 or 3 in parallel or some kind of series or whatever, doing all kinds of silliness to do it. Now Soothe 2 will do that automatically, but frankly, I don't. It's on a 3-minute vocal, it will probably take me 5 minutes to turn down all the S's. Or I could spend 20 minutes auditioning every single de-essing plugin to kind of get it close. This kind of detail is going to save you so much effort. Boosting things you want to hear more of and taking things you want to hear less of.
You were the one who put a spark to this. You were the...
It's like...
Spark to this. You...
So here I can just, we can just separate that out. Pull it down a little bit in anticipation of me brightening it. Put a nice big fade in there, like so.
Back to this, you were the gas.
And I will do this in anticipation. Now, bearing in mind as well, you've got to remember, I printed this with compression on it. So these kinds of elements would have been naturally exaggerated by the process of what I did. Now, hopefully this all makes sense to everybody. Do you know what I'm doing? I am gaining down these S's.
Spark to this.
where they're going to end up being boosted anyway because of additional compression. And just, once you brighten it, they're going to get offensive sounding. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm not looking at the chat. Does everybody understand what I'm doing?
Put a spark to this, you were the gasoline, you were the catalyst. Put the gasoline, you.
So if he hadn't compressed going in and the vocal's a little more raw, you're going to have a couple things happen. You're going to have vocal parts that are too loud. You're going to have vocal parts that are too soft. You're going to have S's that are too harsh. And you're going to have the ends of words that lose intimacy or have great intimacy that we want to bring out. So if you were doing this, I mean, he's working on the S's right now. He doesn't have a lot of words that are getting lost or too loud because he had compressed going in, but if he may have a couple that he'll do, but you'd look for that stuff to make it sound really even and in the pocket and already just dialed in before, and then go through. And I bet he'll do this where he finds ends of words that he really loves the intimacy of that word, and he'll bring that up. That's the kind of stuff you look for during this process.
Absolutely. Very well said. I'm just going to listen to the end of the
catalyst.
So
Yes.
that might be.
Yes. Catalyst.
I like the cry. He's always got like Isaac cry.
Lean, you were the catalyst. Lean,
So in the track.
lean, you were the catalyst.
Cool.
It was last call.
I love that breathe through. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
There's a guy, Joe Clifford. I don't know if anybody knows Jake Clifford. He's in a band called Jump Little Children, and he's one of my favorite singers. And I did an album with him a long time ago, 12 years ago. And he had co-written a lot of really big songs, and he's a great string arranger. And he has quite a pretty voice. He doesn't have any grit to it, but he does this thing because he's a very, very, very skilled singer where he breathes through notes. And so for those of you that are producers and want to work with singers on this, it's literally where it's just doing, so you do the, I don't, just, I don't, and he can do it so well. And you just grab a little bit of air on there and it makes phrases so beautiful. Like that. So all I'm going to do is just gain the end of that quite dramatically, put a big fat fade in.
You guys seeing some similarities here? Any of you OGs to these?
Yeah, I love this stuff. It gives so much personality to vocals.
This is how you get that sound.
It was.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly. This is where you get all the personality out of the mix.
It was last call. It was.
Let's see what that sounds like in it.
It was last call.
It might be too much. Kind of like it, but it might be too much. It will split the difference just a little bit. So plus 3.5.
It was last call. It wasn't you, it was the alcohol.
Probably on the whole more than anything else, we need to try and bring out some personality because we have that really great personality on naturally that it was doing.
I think somewhere something's unmuted, Warren, that's causing like a weird.
No, there's an actual delay
or something. Or is there?
Yeah, there is a vocal that does a delay. Yeah.
Something going on that's making it sound kind of weird.
Oh, yeah, you're right. But there's a harmony, and there was also the mix play.
Last call. It wasn't you, it was the alcohol.
Yeah, I don't know if we're getting much out of it. A little bit. It's always worth that little extra schnizzle.
Alcohol. We talked all night, but you were so.
It's not going to hurt.
We talked all night, but you were so far gone. Another night on Sunset Boulevard. We talked all night. Another night on Sunset Boulevard. Night on Sunset Boulevard. This is a walk away from. This is a walk away.
It's a tough one. I love the attitude of all that extra going on, but let's just reduce it a little bit. Maybe a bit more. because I know what's going to happen. We start getting a bit more aggressive on that. And this is like when I mixed. So I produced and engineered Augustana's second record. I don't know if anybody's a fan of that band. I love that band. It's called Can't Love, Can't Hurt. And they really wanted, we had just done The Fray, so we were hot tickets and all this kind of stuff, same label. So they really wanted, me to do Augustana's record. And, but they really wanted to work with Jim Scott because Jim is absolutely amazing. So the compromise was I engineered and produced it, but Jim mixed it. And Jim would do all of this stuff. Not himself personally. He's not a great Pro Tools guy, but he has a Pro Tools operator, and he would spend a lot of time doing this kind of detail stuff. And if you know Jim's work, it's superlative.
This is a walk away. This is a walk.
I'm exaggerating that aggression on the front. I might be overdoing it. I kind of like it. I might just split the difference a bit. I don't have a problem with, we're keeping all of this. We're not consolidating. So anything in a final mix could be changed.
This is a walk.
I mean, it's got some zizzle on it. There's a 3K.
This is a walk.
But it's a nasty rock song. We've talked about small amps with big muff distortion pedals on it. This isn't pretty.
Walk away from all the dirty little games you play.
Goes back to what Dane was saying about, there not being any kind of one way to do anything, because this is not the pretty vocal. I'm exaggerating a bit of attack there, but I think that's good because it's that section of the song.
This is a walk away.
It's when it goes to the Motown beat, which he's underplaying, but once we get the energy of the drums out, they'll be like, dackle, 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 da. This is a walk away. So it'll actually be, let's rise to the occasion.
From all the dirty little games you play. Yeah, I heard you.
I think I kept that overly, because I did bring some of the breaths down, but I kept that one in because it's got a tone.
Play. Yeah, I heard you. Play. Yeah, I heard you.
Not that you really hear it.
Yeah, I heard your sorries, but I saw no change. I gave you love, you gave me pain. Oh yeah, lit me up like a cigarette.
I'm being selective on the S's that we do at the moment because some of them are sneaking through. Again, nothing's written in stone. Once we've got some extra compression and EQ on it, I might regret not bringing some of them down. But at the moment, I'm only really going for the ones that are annoying me.
Like a cigarette.
And I'm anticipating to be terrible.
Like a cigarette, and you burn me down, and now, and you burn me, and you burn me down, and now there's nothing left. You were the one who put a spark to this. You were the spark to this. You were the.
And each of these you're going to hear in different ways. Some of these might offend you less or more, but have fun with the multi-tracks and do what makes sense to you. But the detail work is going to be really going to pay off when we start compressing and EQing heavier.
You were the gasoline, you were the catalyst.
He obviously turned away from the mic here.
Catalyst.
You can hear him kind of catalyst, and it's annoying.
Catalyst.
So let's just boost it up and see if we can make it a bit more compelling. We might have to do it in sections. Make him feel like he actually was closer up on the mic. I mean, I understand why he's throwing it away, but I don't know if I'm digging it being thrown.
Yeah, maybe not for
Yeah.
studio.
Yeah. Well, it's a tough one, isn't it? It's like, I love expressiveness. When I recorded Steven Tyler, he would literally self-comp. He was the easiest singer I've ever worked with. Because obviously he's a brilliant singer, but but not so much that he would self-comp. We would sing a line and he'd say, "Let me hear that," and then you'd play it back to him. He's like, "Punch me in here." It was just like this is a dream,
Yeah.
And so you'd be done before, but you'd sing for 45 minutes, but at the end of the 45 minutes, you'd comp the song. Where for the rest of us mere mortals, we record 5 to 10 vocals with somebody and then spend 7 hours comping it together to be the best vocal you've ever heard. So in this situation, you know, Brendan was pretty young. Brendan, by the way, has gone on to be quite a successful country writer, the singer of this. He's written a couple of top 10 country hits. But he was in his early 20s when we did this.
Catalyst.
Yeah, you can hear like room bleed, but now it says like Catalyst. The song's called Catalyst, so it doesn't sound like he's going Now we actually have the title of the song.
The catalyst.
Cool.
Don't you know he won't? And don't you know he won't?
So maybe we'll like some of this breathe through here. Maybe we won't in context, but let's grab it. I might even progressively do this. So grab this again.
Oh, he won't.
Oh yeah, I like that. I'm glad we did that. Didn't think there was anything there, but that is cool.
You know,
Yeah.
don't you know it won't be easy letting myself go. I never wanted your tears to flow. Sometimes you need more than.
There's definitely sometimes that's going to take a head off.
I never wanted your tears to flow.
Yeah, carry on. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was saying, there it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So look. Again, you know, if we were out solo, I'd probably hear it ripping our head off a little bit more, but it's also easier to keep it in solo just for the moment.
Tears to.
I like the T. Don't have a problem with that. So let's keep that T for the tears. Let's get rid of some of the shp. Now, my tip would be, if this seems like a lot of listening, it really is. And if it seems like a lot of objectivity built on a ton of subjectivity, it is as well. I think, yeah, so you can be safe doing this rote before you fully understand what it is, and then adjust it to taste after doing compression and EQ. I'll tell you a little story. So my big break wasn't really a big break, but I call it my big break. And the reason why I call it my big break is because it made me take this seriously. So I was 19 years old, and I was living in actually the same town and village I grew up in. So I was in Crookham Village, for anybody who knows where that is, in Hampshire. And there was one of my best friends, still one of my best friends in the world, is Patrick Hannon, is the drummer for the Sundays. And he and his brother, Nick, and his other brothers, the Jamesons, had this recording studio in a farm the original one was in a farm cottage, but then they moved it to an oast house. But this was in the original farm cottage. And I was working in a music store, and I was selling recording equipment because I was like an amateur engineer. We're talking, 8-track cassette days. We're talking early mid-90s. ADATs were just coming in. This is DAWs existed, but they were Sound Toys, the precursor to Pro Tools, and people would like load in like 3 vocal tracks and then edit between them to comp. So digital was it was digital recording, but it wasn't this. And anyway, these local musicians I was friends who would come into the music store I was working. I actually worked in 2, Kingfisher and Anderton's. I'm actually old friends with Lee Anderton. So I was working in these stores, and in comes these musicians, and we bonded, and I told them I engineered, a bit, obviously as limited as I could. And I get a phone call on a Friday just before the store closes going, "Warren, we just got this weekend gig, and we got a booking, and we can't get anybody to cover the booking. So would you be the assistant / engineer for this session?" And I was like, "Sure, whatever." And they said, "Yeah, we think it's like," and it came from Guy Chambers. Guy Chambers he wrote like Angel, and like he was the main writer for Robbie Williams, like all the big hits, Angel and everything. Yeah. massive writer. He was in World Party and really stupidly talented. Wrote Kylie Minogue's biggest songs, blah, blah, blah. So he had called up and said, oh, I've got one of my friends coming down. Would you record her? Well, the friend turned out to be now one of my lifelong friends, Louise Goffin, who happens to be Carole King and Jerry Goffin's daughter. So they said, yeah, we think it's like Carole King's daughter or something. And I'm just like, what? You know, little village studio. So anyway, so the next day I turn up and I'm getting all set up and everything. And it's Andy Jackson, Pink Floyd's producer and engineer, shows up to our little studio. Yep. And with Louise Goffin, who's Carole King's daughter, and the bass player is Gerland Dorsey, David Bowie's bass player, and the rhythm section is and the guitar player and the drummer are the Stacey brothers. For anybody who knows who that is, they're England's biggest session players. So there I am, like, hi everybody, I don't, like pretending that I know what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing whatsoever. All I know is Andy comes in, he has a D112, he sticks it on the kick drum, he puts a 57 on the top, and he brings out his pair of 87s and puts them over the top. And I'd never seen anybody just use 4 mics on a drum kit, but within 10 minutes, with of course Jeremy Stacey playing drums, look him up, he plays at King Crimson at the moment, slightly good drummer. So, super balanced drummer with the best drum sound I've ever heard. He had my little Ashley compressor, and he was just getting like a little tap on the snare. My point is like, it was an amazing experience working with some of the greatest musicians in the world at 19 years old, having no idea what I was doing. I did not touch the microphone placement, EQ, or the compression on anything after they left, because I knew that it sounded better, but I didn't know why. I didn't know idea why. But 2 days later, somebody comes in for a drum session. I'm doing the drum session. And everybody's like, wow, the best drum sound we've ever had. And I'm just like, I have no idea, but I know that that's where the mic's supposed to be. You know what I mean? So sometimes it is okay. Nobody else will tell you this, because you go on to, I keep want to call it Gear Space. What they call Gear Space. You go on a Gear Space and they'll tell you, you have to be an expert. And sometimes you just have to freaking act as if. And if something sounds better, and it's like with the mic here and the this, that, you don't necessarily have to have the science degree to know why it's better. Just copy it. I copied Andy Johns's attack and release times on a vocal after doing a session with him. It's Andy Johns. He did little bands like Led Zeppelin and Van Halen. And the way he had it set up on a vocal, I was like, I suppose that's the way you set up the attack and release on a 1176. I couldn't hear the difference. I was like moving the attack like, a quarter of a turn this way, a quarter of a turn. To me, it sounded exactly the same, but it sounded much better when he set it up than when I could set it up from scratch. So I just copied it until after a while, I realized, actually working with him, that he had the attack and release set for every instrument the same, but it's the default on the Bomb Factory 1176 when you open it up. That setting where it's like this, everybody sees it. Yeah. That's where he just would leave it there and it sounded good. But my point is it made me focus and listen, because I knew something was better and I didn't touch it. And I just, after a while, I started hearing why it was better, and I started with twist around, and it's okay. Act as if. So many people have built careers. I'll tell you one other one. I can't remember his name. Very famous photographer. So there's this really famous photographer, and he did the Seal cover. You remember the Seal one where Steele's standing like this? Huge, that album that sold like 10 million copies. Yeah. He did the cover of it. He was a, set designer. So he worked for The Face, which for British people will know is like one of the most influential magazines in the world. Nobody gets paid very well on it, but it's like a style magazine, Face magazine. So he worked at Face, and he would do all the set design, and he also would choose all the costuming and everything. And so they loved him. He was like super stylish. One day he went to an editor and said, I've got an idea for a whole spread, but I want to be the photographer. And they're like, you're not a photographer. Like, yeah, I think I can do this. So he went out and he hired the best assistant cameraman in the world, went to like Helmut Lang or wherever it was, and hired his guy, and overnight became a photographer. He had an eye. He knew what he wanted it to look like. He just needed somebody to tell him how to do it. He's like, I want it to be like this. I want the line like that. I want it to be exposed like this. And the guy went, well, it's an f-stop here, and you do this, and blah, blah, blah. And you use this speed of film. And he's like, no, no, no. And he's a photographer. And now, of course, he's, world-class photographer. But the point is that he got the results. So with stuff like this, sometimes you might be like, well, I don't really know why. Just try it. Try these kinds of things, and it's okay. It's like, I know everybody says you have to listen and not look. I agree. You do have to listen and not look. But when you're coming up and you're learning this stuff, you can't hear some of these subtle differences. So if it does take an eyeballing going, that S looks really big and fat, maybe turn it down. Honestly, it's okay. It's okay to take a big blobbing S that is the same volume as the word coming after it and turn it down in anticipation that when you make it brighter, it's going to rip your head off. To me, that was my biggest break. Obviously, there's all the big famous names involved with it, but it was more than that. It was the fact that it sounded really, really good. I didn't know why, but I didn't touch anything on the console, any compressor or any mic placement, because I was like, this sounds good. And it took me a while to understand why it sounded good. But if I hadn't done that and I ripped it all down, I would never have had another good drum sound. I would have been flailing around, So, yeah. Plus, I don't believe there's any geniuses in this business. There's just people who work hard and apply the information.
Amen.
Personally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wanted your tears. Wanted your
So the question is there some information in here that we need more of, where he's a little dipped? I'm just going to, just for schnitz and schniggles, I'm going to turn it up a bit, a couple of times. Get in here and just see if some of this kind of lower level stuff is actually proper notes.
I never wanted your tears.
Actually, I like that.
I never wanted your
Wanted you. It's adding a bit of percussiveness that wasn't there, so that's another good thing.
I never wanted your
Because if a singer's got a great pocket, Michael Jackson being the ultimate pocket singer, obviously, unbelievable, it can add an extra dimension and rhythm to the track.
I never wanted your tears to
So yeah, boosting like fronts of syllables and stuff like that can be really, really good. Consonants, sorry, it can be really good.
flow. Sometimes
There's a little cry in there. Let's get that little cry. Again, some of this is going to come out with compression, but to Caleb's point, let's just give it some help.
sometimes
Yeah, I love that breathe through. It's like off camera, Michael was complimenting me on my Cure cover, which was very nice of him. But I did say, honestly, if you listen to Robert Smith's voice soloed, he's got so much of that all these like little cries and things that only he can do. That just he can write the simplest, best melody. Once he sings it, it's $1 million. It's ridiculous. This is fun, gentlemen.
This is the fun stuff.
Yeah, dude. We love
Yeah.
this.
If you don't like this stuff, you're in the wrong business.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, people say, comping vocals is like, for instance, is like, putting an ice pick through your skull. It kind of is, but it's also the most satisfying thing ever.
This is my favorite. You're telling the story here, though. This will be everything to the listener once you're done. The relationship the listener has to that vocal is because of the intention you're adding to the process throughout all of this.
Yeah, I agree.
tears to flow. Tears to flow.
It's going to be interesting. Gets a little lispy. We'll see what happens with the high end once it's on the vocal.
Wanted your tears to flow. Sometimes you need more than
See that he dips, see you miss it. See if we can help that out.
sometimes you need more than
It would be nice to, again, compression might help a little bit with that, but let's see if we can just grab this phrase and push it just a little bit.
I'm sorry, I might have missed it, but what was the signal path going in?
On this, it was, this wasn't my U47. I didn't have the U47. This is probably an 87 in those days. Very beaten up old 87. Not old, cool old, like 70s, but like mid 90s old. Beaten up, remember the grey ones they had in the
Mhm.
mid 90s, that really ugly grey blue color. Yeah, they were like a blue grey, just beaten up. That I think it's still my floating 1073. So that was the BAE one, BAE 1073. Then a 160. Was it 160 VU or did I not have it then? It might have it's probably it was probably the 165 with the variable attack and release turned off, just set on the auto mode, so it's like a 160 going into an 1176. So I'll have 3-to-1 on the ratio of the compressor, and then 20-to-1 on the Yuri. So what happens is you get kind of a tap like this, and then every time it goes super loud like this, that's when the 1176 comes in and gets it.
Yeah, activates. Yep.
Yeah. But it's coming on like, yeah, it's not doing this the whole time.
Moments. Yep.
Yeah, we've had so many discussions about this, but always limit second. I don't know. That's another one of those. I don't know where people got this idea that you're supposed to limit then compress. There's no logic to that whatsoever. Every mastering engineer I've ever said, but there's whole forums with people fighting about it. People fight me on it when I go 160 into 1176. I read that so and so. It's like, I don't know. Try it. Try limiting the signal, and then try getting some compression out of it after it's a brick wall. Try compressing it. But apparently, so and so, the famous blah blah blah, wrote once. I don't know. There's only so much you can do. Yeah, never limit first.
So I'm guilty of this. I actually do that.
You limit then, and then you use a compressor.
Limit for dynamics, and then I'll basically use compression just for seasoning, just like
Only for enhancement,
just for the circuitry of the compressor itself.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely use any piece of equipment for a specific sound. I agree with that, but for actual compression, it would never limit then compress if you're trying to get an even sound. But if you like the sound of a 1176 for the kind of mid-range crunch it gives, yeah, I get that. So I'm getting these like little phrases that he's a little weak on and boosting them in between.
Any more than I. Any more than I.
Yeah, actually helps that come out a little bit. These are fun things to do. I like this kind of stuff, and it really does. It does mean that if we can do this in good detail, by the time we come to compress, the compressor should only be doing a light amount of work because it's coming in consistently.
Sometimes you need more than I handle.
Let's see what we got on the end of this phrase.
Handle.
Cool. Well, we're pretty much coming to the end of this. Caleb, is there anything else you want me to go through, or do you want to reiterate or ask
no, this
questions?
is good. I think this is a good spot. I mean, we could play everything one more time, but I want everyone to hear that. Are we closer? Are we 75% of the way there? Are we 60% of the way there? I've seen some of you comment, wow, it's amazing how good this is already sounding just with volume, just with gain and volume. This is the right mindset. This is the mindset I see the people who are doing this the very best do. And yeah, it's already sounding really great. Obviously, there's fine tuning to be done tomorrow, but now we know where the weak parts are. You've been mentioning them as you go through. Oh, I need to fix this. I need to fix this. I need to fix this.
Yep.
You could write these down or store them in your memory, just so tomorrow you go, oh, I know where to start and I know where to end. I know it needs to be fixed, and you're working with a lot of attention.
We're going to have to do two things dramatically tomorrow, which is get into automated panning, and basic EQ, because the panning actually is quite important, because it's what's stopping the verses and the choruses happening with the drums, because the guitars at the moment being panned kind of a 50-50, a narrower thing, are smothering the drums on the choruses, and the drums need more impact in the pre-chorus and the chorus, because, as I was pointing out, the pre-chorus in particular, he was playing a groove that was very unfamiliar to him, and he was very tentative on it. So the guitars are getting big, but the drums are getting small. So there's going to be, this wouldn't necessarily happen on all these songs. If this was a band that maybe had been less produced, and we're playing playing a track that they had played 100 times and had already recorded 50 times, 5 times maybe. By the time they came into the studio, they probably wouldn't have these kinds of issues. But, I sprung a lot of stuff on this drummer. I took him well out of his comfort zone. So there's a lot of things like sections where he's playing a little tentatively. There's drum fills that he wouldn't normally have done that I was doing. There was builds and stops that were added. He was taking a lot of information when we did this record.
Yeah. I think a lot of you who have been here before probably notice Warren's really functioning on an advanced level, in that he's hearing all this stuff. He's not having to really think about a lot of numbers on DBFS or metering or any of that kind of stuff. He's using his ears, but that doesn't come just naturally. That comes with years and years and years of playing with stuff, with technical training, with experimentation. And so it's really important now that all of you go and do this. It doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter even Warren's demo as much as you getting in and getting your hands dirty with this. It's very, very important for you to do this to really, get the point and learn kinesthetically. So we have tracks for this one. It sounds like if you don't have a mix you're working on, you can all go and work on this session, but I want you to have the same exact challenge that we gave Warren today, which is a volume only mix. So if you're working on your own mix, maybe save an alternate version of it, remove all the processing plugins. We're going to essentially have you start over. If you're working with the tracks that we're providing for this song, obviously you won't need to do this. You just bring them in and prep your session. But bring all your faders down, bring in everything one by one, build your mix only your volume only mix, and see how far you can push it just using volume, panning, gain automation, stuff like that. No plugins allowed for any frequencies, dynamics, or space allowed to this point. Challenge yourself. It's really fun to challenge yourself to see how good you can make this mix sound. And you have to be a little bit clever with everything, trying to find ways of making everything sound good. And then as you go through, make little notes to yourself of, okay, this still has some problems. I'm gonna solve this tomorrow when we go back through and do EQ and compression and different things like that. And you'll see how this workflow totally compartmentalizes your mind. You'll work much more efficiently. You'll work much more quickly, and you'll work with a ton more intention. And especially as you go through the vocals, as you start to apply that gain automation that Warren was just doing, be sure that you keep in mind that it's part technical and, as he said, part creative, right? It's part subjective. You're starting to tell this story. And so you got to think of what you're having the listener pay attention to. How engaged do you want it to be in certain moments with the vocal? How engaged do you want it to be with these certain parts of the song? And you always want the listener to be drawn to a certain part of the story that you're telling. Guide them through this process, bring things in, pull things out, and especially with the vocal, make sure it's something really intimate. Anyway, that's a lot of fun. I want you to all have an opportunity to go do that tonight, this evening. We'll come back tomorrow. Warren will dive into a deep dive into compression, EQ. It's going to be a lot of fun to see that kind of 20% polish. Now, we say this is the most important day, and it is, but that polish is essential to getting that pro sounding record as well. It's not that it doesn't matter. It's just not as important as doing this stuff today. Thanks, Warren, for your time today. Thanks for everyone being here. Thanks for everyone helping other people in the chat. Thanks for everyone in school already commenting and leaving posts on other people's comments and interacting. That's what it's all about. It's all about this community. But have fun doing this challenge overnight tonight. We'll see you same time tomorrow. Is that what
Excellent.
Okay.
Absolutely. That was so much fun.
Same time tomorrow. Thanks, Warren. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you all tomorrow, and have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.